Welcome to Manwharecaps, spoilers ahead, watch out, and take care. The manhwa starts off with showing us a night sky, with someone talking about the senses of an assassin. We see a man being told good work, and his name is Lan. He looks up and says thank you, to a man named Sir Dareth. Lan says that his senses are telling him he will be killed by Dareth Robert tonight. Dareth tells him he's performed his tasks well, and it's thanks to his effort that the family has been growing quickly. Lan says he's just doing what he should be. Dareth asks him if he believes he needs freedom. Lan tells him that shadows are meant to follow orders, and he doesn't have his own thoughts or feelings. Dareth says if he knew all of this, why did he act on his own again, then asks how he undid his brainwashing. Lan begins to sweat nervously, wondering how he noticed. We learn that the brainwashing is a method in which the Robert family control their assassins, or also called shadows. They kidnap or buy children, then make them work as assassins doing all kinds of evil deeds, essentially turning them into loyal dogs. Lan was also brainwashed, but coincidentally was able to free himself. He asks Dareth how he knew, to which he replies all of the assassins have two collars. One is brainwashing, then he snaps his fingers, saying this was the second one. Lan begins to cough up blood as his chest tightens. He screams out in pain and falls to the floor. He clenches his chest, saying it feels as if his heart is being sawed in half. Dareth smiles, telling him it's called rage worm, and it's an insect inside his body that is eating his heart. Lan asks if brainwashing wasn't enough, saying he acted so righteous, but it's sickening. Dareth says it's called being thorough, and that there's a saying in which everyone wears a mask, and his mask just happens to be thicker than others. Lan angrily says his name, and explains how he doesn't remember much of his past, since he's just been raised as a loyal hunting dog, and as the head of the assassins he lived without his own mind or emotions, but he learned of a technique called Ring of Fire, ROF for short. It was a skill that belonged to the continent's greatest swordsman a long time ago, and it allowed him to escape the brainwashing. Lan says he thought he could finally achieve freedom, and he began to have hopes. So why is he meeting death instead of freedom? He wonders what types of sins he committed to have such a meaningless death. He grits his teeth, and yelling damn it, it can't end this way. He stands up saying if he'll die here, then he'll at least take his arm. Or injure him at least. He screams that he won't die so pathetically, then leaps forward at Dareth. We see a slash in Lan's eyes, then his head goes flying away from his body. It plops onto the floor, and Dareth stares at his lifeless body, thinking that he prevented everything. He says it's been a while, wondering when the last time he had an injury was. He says that at least Lan will forever hold that L. He tells his men to get rid of the body, and he walks away. Lan says that Dareth is the strongest martial artist on the continent, so it's a given he can't win against him, and there's nothing he can do about it. He quickly says there is, and that he's upset he had to live life like this, and that he's upset he was humiliated and manipulated all his life. He's upset he didn't comp life the ROF. He doesn't care if it's God or the devil, someone please answer. He needs his revenge no matter what. We see his necklace begins to glow blue. A window appears saying he's been chosen by rage, and it will possess his body, but then he gets an error since he died, and his eyes close. He opens them to see a butterfly in a field, and we see a woman saying Sonny look here, as she holds a toy. He says mama, and she asks him what it is, then he stretches his hands outward. She starts to say he's so cute, and he says he cannot get used to it, and the woman cuddling him is named Sylvia. And while it's hard to believe, she picks him up and tells him to say mom, he was reincarnated as this woman's child. With all of his memories of being an assassin, he thought he was just dreaming at first. We see his mother holding him, saying the weather is nice today, and she hopes the patriarch will be back soon. Then he can give her a handsome name. He says it makes sense that she can't call him Sonny forever. Lan starts to explain that he hasn't figured out much after reincarnating, but he understands he is in a wealthy house or renowned family. And he guesses it's better to be reborn into a powerful family than a normal one, but he still needs to get his revenge. The rage and desire for revenge are still always on his mind, but he must remain patient. Since he hasn't left the room, he doesn't know where he is, or his family's position is more important, let alone the situation he's in. He was also unable to complete the ROF, so he needs to stay patient. While he was the best assassin history in the Robert family, he needs to be better than he was previously. He says based on the family's mansion, it's much more than just a renowned family. The door slams open, and a maid tells Sylvia that the patriarch is coming. Sylvia is surprised, and says she needs to prepare, but the maid tells her it's too late. She begins to grow nervous, and then the door opens, and a pressuring aura enters the room. Lan wonders what this tension is. Then we see the man enter the room. We see he has blonde hair and a red cape, but Lan recognizes him. Sylvia calls out to him. He asks if this is a child. Lan says that his ice-cold or flame-like eyes he has to be the zenith of the continent. The King of Annihilation, Glenn Zeekhart. He says that it seems like he's been reborn into the most powerful family on the continent. Sylvia asks her dad if he wants to hold him, then by some sort of ironic fate, he gives him the name of Lan, since it means shadow. So it's the second life and now he has the same name again. It cuts to night, and Lan wonders if everyone is asleep now. After suffocation he's finally gotten a chance. He says he was always sleeping, and when he wakes up Sylvia was with him, so he hasn't been able to use mana or anything, but now he gets to sleep alone. He sits up and sighs, then begins to cultivate his ROF. He explains how the continent's normal training method uses breathing, and you absorb nature's mana and gather aura in your energy core. However, ROF is like when a mage creates a mana circle around their heart, allowing him to grow in all stats, which makes it the best training technique, at least for becoming a martial artist that is. It has certain advantages that even Dareth isn't aware of, and since it allows him to train his mental too, so if he can make the Zeekhart swordsmanship him taking revenge on Dareth won't be a dream. He says he's unsure if it's because of his body's physique, but his body's mana circuit is filled with freezing energy. He also detects that he has 9 places being blocked. At this rate he's going to die because of them being blocked. So he needs to break through it using ROF, but just throwing the cold energy away is a waste. If he can fuse it with his flow, he can achieve something special. He opens his eyes to see that he fell asleep while cultivating, and he struggles to stay awake, then falls asleep again. We see his grandpa creep in by his bed, then he puts his hand over him. Then the next day comes, and Lan is schmoving down the hall. His mother calls out to him, encouraging him to crawl a bit more. Lan starts to complain about having to act like a baby, saying it makes him want to die. She asks what he can do, saying he's such a good boy. She hears a man's voice call out to her, and she's happy to see him. She calls him sir, then changes it to saint. He smiles saying to just call him sir. Lan recognizes him as the Saint of Rags. He's a man who has reached the ends of the world with power, techniques and skill. While he's the most famous physician you can find, he's never around due to his wanderlust. He says he heard she had a baby so he stopped by, then asks if Lan is her kid. I guess sage is an overstatement. He picks up Lan, says he's completely different from Glenn, then asks his name. She tells him, and he says surely she didn't name him because it means shadow, right? She says they did, then he asks him what Glenn is thinking. Lan says that since they are being casual with each other, it means the rumors of him and Glenn being best friends was true. Rags, his new name, says he'll take a look at Lan. He places his hand on him, and begins to analyze him. And says that his condition isn't good. Sylvia asks if there's a problem, and he tells her that Lan has the Bittercold curse. So his mana is being blocked by ice energy, and before it gets difficult, they need to treat him often so he won't die. She says he's lying. He tells her he'll write a prescription. The maid quickly comes in saying that Patriarch is looking for him. He says he'll head there after his conversation. She says he said he would like to meet now. Rags sighs, saying that guy can't get his timing right, and reluctantly goes. Lan says that he finally understands the cold now, but knowing doesn't change anything, since he just needs to mold his ROF. His mother begins to cry and he's surprised. She says it's a lie while crying. She says she can't end like this, and it's impossible he will die. As she'll do whatever it takes to make him better, she says he can't die. Lan wonders what this emotion is, saying his heart is aching and it's painful. He says he doesn't want to see this, and he puts his hand on her cheek saying not to cry. She stops it, and he speaks perfect English, then says Mammy. It cuts to the Patriarch talking to Rags, and she bursts into the room, and the maid tries to stop her. She is out of breath, and Glenn asks what's the reason for her rudeness, to show such unsightly behavior. She gets on her hands and knees, saying she begs him to please save Lan. She says he must be aware of Lan's state, and he is her everything, so please save him. Glenn says that Lan shows how difficult it is to live as a martial artist, so why would he help someone who cannot contribute to the family? She says that he's still his grandson. He says it's the grandson she brought back after leaving her family behind, and all he can do is give him the Zeekhart name. She should be thankful he's doing this much. She begs out again, and he yells for her to be taken out. She continues begging him to save Lan, and cries out as they drag her out. Rags watches, and sighs, calling him stubborn. He asks if being honest is hard, asking why he's doing this when he called him over to look at his grandson. He says to shut up and tell him the details. Rags gives him the recap on it all, and says that thanks to Glenn pushing some of the cold air out he'll be fine for a bit, but it's nearly impossible for his grandson to be a martial artist. Glenn says he's fine with anything as long as he lives. Rags asks why he named him Lan. Glenn takes the cup away from his lips, saying that it doesn't just mean shadow, and he looks into the tea, saying that 1,000 years ago it held a different meaning. It cuts to later and we see Sylvia feeding Lan some medicine from Mr. Rags, but it reeks. He calls out to her and looks happy. She's happy he's enduring it, and even the maid is pogging out. Sylvia holds him close. Lan says well it's bitter, it's the fire medicine he needs the most right now, as the warm air pushes the cold air out from his circuits. It cuts to even later, 2 whole years after he started training and taking the medicine. We see he's achieved 1 ring in the ROF, then 2 more years passed. He explains how his days have been, with him playing with Sylvia and Helen in the morning, then around midnight and nap times he trains. After some more time passing, Lan is now 5 years old. We see that status window is back now, explaining how he has achieved the 2nd ROF. Lan smiles, saying he's finally done it, while looking at the window. He says now his mana senses have gotten more sensitive. He wonders if it's because of the window. Then he hears Helen talking. She asks if she can have his laundry. Then he watches her rummage through his clothes, and he realizes she cannot see the status window. He explains how it started appearing ever since he achieved the 1-star ROF. He says he wondered what it was at first, but it's a comfortable system that lets him gauge his current stats. And judging by Helen's reaction only he can see it. He says even though he's 2-star, his stamina is still low, and the biblical curse remains. He says if it weren't for the medicine, then his progress would be hard. During these last 5 years everyone in the annex has been making sure he is comfortable. Whenever he hurts they take care of him as if he's a prince. He sighs, saying that since he's only 5 he has a lot of time left, so he doesn't need to rush. The biblical curse and the low stamina are both problems, which is the reason he gets tired if he moves. But in his past life he was the greatest assassin, and since he's got the ROF, those weaknesses will be as good as gone. Especially after he learns the Zeekhard swordsmanship, he can cut Dareth's neck. But due to how strong Dareth is, he needs to take it slow, and when the opportunity arises, seize it. Sylvia enters the room, and she told him that they have somewhere to go today. So change and get ready to go to the main building. For some reason now the author decides it's a good time to explain that the continent is run by the 6 emperors and 5 demons. Of them, the Zeekhard family belongs to the 6 emperors. The emperors represent good influence, while the demons threaten the peace, and there are several powers outside of them as well, and they have a judgment ceremony to see if the powers are good or bad. Today is the Zeekhard's judgment day. As he enters we see a lot of people are attending it today, and they are discussing everyone who is participating in the ceremony. Someone mentions Sylvia, and they call her an outcast. She enters the room, and everyone looks at her with disdain. They realize that Lan is her kid and are pretty much expecting him to fail, since they make the standard drop. Lan says he dislikes how they are treating his mother, and when he hears them call her shameless, it angers him. She tells him that it's okay, and to just look at her. He doesn't say anything. The patriarch begins to enter the room, and Lan says that it's been a long time. Glenn takes a seat, and we see him looking down, and he says it seems like everyone is here. He motions his hand, as a giant sword falls from the sky. Lan says it's the sword of judgment, and Glenn says it's time for the ceremony to start. Lan explains that if you put your hand on a stone the sword determines their mana ability. Some guy says they will begin with Burn Zeekhard, and the kid says here. As he does his exam, Lan explains how a child's mana ability remains stagnant after 4. And the ceremony that takes place to determine their mana ability is right here in the judgment ceremony. We see the burn gets wind, and people are excited. Glenn tells him it's a good attribute for a swordsman. Then we see the next is a girl named Runansleon. Lan says he understands now that the further the mana travels up, the purer it is, and the mana's attribute is shown by the tip of the sword. And this is how they determine talent. He also comments how the people here value talent as much as their life. He says he probably won't get good results, even with a 2-star ROF. He still has a lot of cold air inside of his circuits. But the results do not matter. They finally call for the last person, and the room is filled with disgust, as it is shown to be Lan. Sylvia tells him to go. He tells her okay. Then thinks about how he doesn't have much expectations. He just needs to find out which mana attribute suits his body. She tells him to do what the other kids did. He tells her he's got it. Then lets out a sigh. He touches the sword, and we see it glow orange. He wonders what is this light he is seeing, and then his vision begins to transform into that of a scene of a child's drawing of Pokemon, with a man standing before them. One of them get close to the man, as Lan is directly behind the man. He wonders who he is. The man points his sword into the sky, as the same aura we saw a second ago envelops it, but we cannot see his face. He then swings down, killing the monsters in front of him, creating a massive explosion. Lan then opens his eyes, and is surprised. While nobody else experienced what he saw, they instead laugh due to how little aptitude he has, and Glenn looks disappointed. His mother comforts him, saying he did good, while the rest of the room continue to flame him, saying at least he has guts, but the only thing he inherited is blonde hair and red eyes. Glenn tells them to stop yapping, as it's too loud in here. Then orders them all to leave, since the ceremony is now over. The randoms keep smiling, and everyone leaves besides Glenn and Alfred. Glenn says he guesses it can't be helped, while he had no expectations is that really all there is to Lan. The sword begins to emanate the same aura from before Lan saw the flashback, and Glenn is surprised as the sword erupts with the aura. Glenn is still shocked, then says it's golden like the sun, then recalls a book mentioning how the first Zekehart's patriarch had displayed transcendental fire that could even melt the flames of the demon realm. Golden mana and flames, which was a one-time occurrence throughout the family history. The mana will shine radiantly like the sun, and it is called golden flames. Glenn wonders what is going on. Back to Lan's point of view, we see that his traits are still not unlocked, and he decides it's time to go for 3 stars on his ROF. We learn 7 years have already passed since the first judgment ceremony. So now he is 12. For some reason the scanlator group says 21, math isn't their strong suit. Now he is able to reach the doorstep to the 3rd stage, and he would have been able to progress quicker if he could do something about the cold. His tolerance for water also became 2 stars, so the coldness has disappeared. And he decides to start physical training too. We hear his mother asking what he's doing here, saying he needs to get ready before they are late. It's now time for the 2nd judgment ceremony. So he'll need to see those annoying bastards again. It skips to the end of the ceremony. Lan says that it ended much earlier than expected. Then Glenn calls out his name, saying he's sure he's received orders to attend basic training, so why has he not responded for an entire month? Lan is confused as to what he's talking about, and Sylvia yells saying he's different from other children, as he has too much cold energy to endure the training. Glenn says that this is their land, as there are no exceptions for someone of the Zekeheart name. She begs that they give him a little bit of time, and he asks if she'll leave the family again with that child. She begins to grow anxious as he tells her she must live as a Zekeheart, and if she doesn't want to, then leave. Everyone begins to laugh, saying watch her run away again, and it would be interesting to watch, but she cannot have her mana circuits destroyed a second time. Then they scoff while calling her pathetic. Lan says he understands why they treat his mother poorly, as she's left the family before. She has traces of having learned martial arts, but has no aura since she broke her energy core and mana circuits. She left the family to marry his father, but he died during her pregnancy, giving her no choice but to come back. It's obvious why a direct lineage who left and crawled back would be treated poorly. But that's just what the others think. Since he is now her son, he will not watch her be treated like this. She asks what he's doing as he approaches the sword, saying she'll take care of this. He tells her it's fine, and as Glenn has ordered he will begin attending training next month. The current Martial Hall Master asks if he really didn't know, saying that it's not something he can endure, so just give up. Lan says that it's okay, he needs to live up to the family name, so he will attend the training. Glenn lets out an aura, asking if he understands the weight of the words he just spoke. The aura flies past Lan, and he begins to bleed, saying it feels as if he is being crushed. Just his look can do this. Then he realizes Glenn is much stronger than Robert, saying he fits the name King of Annihilation. Sylvia says he's still young, he doesn't know what he said. The Martial Hall Master agrees, saying to calm down. Glenn tells them he is speaking right now, scaring both Sylvia and the hall monitor. She quickly grabs Lan, saying she's sorry, but he isn't in the state to train, so please stop with the aura. Lan's face looks pained, and mentions for the 8th time how he lived as an assassin, and was always closer to death than life. But he refuses for that to be the case anymore, as he will no longer hide in the darkness, and will no longer live as the assassin Lan. He grits his teeth, saying he will bring his mother back to his original position, and he walks forward. He says he doesn't know the weight of the words, since he was raised in a separate building. He doesn't know how powerful their family is, so he would like to learn through training. And he will protect Sylvia, as well as the smiles and joy of those around them. Glenn asks if he's saying he will judge the Zekeheart standards through training. Lan says it's the only choice he has. Glenn says he'll make sure the instructor prepares accordingly, so he isn't disappointed. Lan then falls over, saying he used to be the best assassin, but now with his current potential, he will show them all how strong he will become. We see some kids training, and then we are introduced to the other martial hall master, Karun Zekeheart, saying it wasn't Lan meant to be too weak to even move properly, and someone else is telling him yes, and that a maid overheard the conversations between Rags and the patriarch. So he is definitely suffering from an illness. Karun says that Lan's body was definitely in an abnormal condition both today and all the other times he's seen him, so how was he able to endure father's aura? He says thinking about it, Sylvia was more talented than anyone else, so place a maid into their building, and do it quickly, and make her report everything that she can find. We see at the 5th hall, Glenn is walking through it, and everyone bows to him, except a red-haired elf. Glenn tells him to stop pretending to be asleep, and get up Lemur. He says it's amazing that he's the only person his sleeping techniques don't work on. Glenn says everyone else is working hard, except him, the head instructor. Lemur says they are just following his orders. He's working with his head, while they work with their bodies. Glenn says he doesn't mature even after 50 years. Lemur says people don't change easily. Then asks if he's here because of his youngest grandson, then tells him that Sylvia also came to see him, but didn't expect Glenn to come too. She asked Lemur to make sure he doesn't get injured. So if Glenn has come to make the same request, he's wasting time, as he won't make any exceptions even if he's the youngest. Glenn says alright and not to lessen the intensity of training, as he doesn't want weaklings. Lemur recognizes something, then stops himself and starts acting all giddy, saying he must really love his grandson and some other stuff. Glenn says if he wasn't his friend he'd be on the floor right now. He tells Lemur not to go easy and fail anyone who is unworthy, that way only the worthy can receive his training. Lemur says he'll do as he wishes, then Glenn takes his leave. Lemur thinks about Lan, wondering what he's like. Then we see his status window, saying he's achieved the 3rd ROF, making him a 3-star, which then reduces his curse of bitter cold. Lan says it definitely feels different, and his sensitivity has increased so his mind feels clearer than before. We see his mother comforting him after training, which is helping him learn his limits, and his status window is helping his growth speed up. But this is just the beginning, as their training is infamous for its difficulty, and being a 3-star is just the first step. He needs a good foundation in order to be able to progress smoothly. And for him to excel more than anyone else, so those who mock him will shut up, then after that the heavenly sword Saint Dareth will have to be clapped. His mother enters the room, saying she's surprised he's still up. He asks what she's doing here so late. She says since he's going to the training hall, she wanted to talk to him before he leaves. Then she asks if he must go, saying she wants to stop him, since he never expresses it when he's hurting, and what if he gets badly injured. She says it's not she doesn't want him to go, how about postponing for a year? He tells her no, as he can't stand when people insult her, especially the disgusting faces they make while shit-talking her. So if he does well in training he believes she won't receive such treatment anymore. She smiles, saying she's sure he's wondering why people treat them so poorly. Then she explains how she fell in love with his father during a mission, but it was difficult to be with him, due to him being a normal knight. So she ruined her core in circuits, and left the family. Then she tells him he actually had an older sister too. She was 2 years older than him, and her name was Sia. But they were ambushed, and his father wasn't that strong, and she was pregnant. So they couldn't do anything, but his father hired guards to keep them safe, but they were obviously terrible since they came way too late. And both his father and sister were brutally murdered. And she didn't know what else to do, but return to the family, which is why she is treated so poorly, but it's not like she can say anything against it. He thinks about how she is selfish. She threw away responsibility in the name of love, and crawled back afterward, and he understands why they treat her so poorly now. But she's the first person to show him affection, even though she is selfish. She is the only mother he's ever had. He asks her if she regrets her choices. She says no she doesn't, since she lived like she was invisible in the family, but after leaving she felt like a real person. She was happy then, and she is happy now. She says she's sorry for being a bad mother. He tells her that he's fine so she shouldn't worry about it. He smiles looking at her, saying he will get his revenge after helping her get her position back in the family. She begins to cry, and bawl like a baby. It cuts to a bit after and he says, reassuring her was difficult. And he'll need to check the ROF and sleep, since he doesn't have long until training. He begins to check it, saying it's spinning faster. Now he's a 3-star, then wonders how the later levels will be. A blue orb begins to appear in front of him, and begins to speak, saying it's finally time, and that his rage has reached them, and they introduce themselves as Wrath, the second lord of the demon realm. Lan is confused, and we see that his hidden trait is being unlocked, and that it's rage. Wrath says if he sacrifices his soul and body, then realizes Lan is just a child. Lan asks who he is, and Wrath says he wants to know who he is, and that the rage he felt wasn't an emotion a child could feel. Then it notices something, saying that never mind, and it was truly his rage, and he's just hiding it deep down. Wrath then asks for him to give his body and soul, then he will help get the revenge he desires. Lan wonders if it's the rage towards Dareth that he is feeling, then says he doesn't need Wrath's help, as he'll do it himself. As he doesn't want help from someone else. Wrath says he's misunderstanding something, as this isn't a negotiation. The decision is already made, and he begins to grow in size over Lan, who begins to feel an intense cold. Wrath says all he needs to do is give his body up, and dives at him. As he gets closer to Lan, it begins to cover the room in the blue ore, even freezing some water. Lan says it feels like his mind is freezing over, then Wrath begins to take the appearance of Dareth, saying to let the rage flow, and even if he is a god, he will die. Lan says he's enduring due to his water attribute, but this isn't just cold. Wrath is consistently stimulating his rage from within, then he whispers into Lan's ear as Dareth. Lan says he doesn't know what Wrath would do, if given the body, so he cannot let it be a possibility. Wrath says it's easier to accept, and there's no reason to be holding on. He wants to minimize the damages, since he'll be using his body, but he leaves him no choice. He'll just swallow him whole without waiting. Lan says his body feels like it's breaking, and he cannot hold on much longer. At this rate he will die. Then he notices something, saying if he can endure the cold because of his water attribute, then he can lower the pain with his ROF. It's the only option he has to survive currently. He begins to channel it, and Wrath begins to grow nervous as he is being fought off. He says how is this possible, even if he just awakened it makes no sense. Lan firmly tells him he will get revenge on his own, and he won't let some ghost use his body. Wrath is angry he caught it direct like that, saying he was a demon lord. Lan starts taunting him, saying he guesses it doesn't mean shit, seeing as how he cannot beat him. He recalls Wrath saying he just awakened, so it must be why he cannot use his full power. Then he notices the status window appear, saying new abilities unlocked. Wrath says that's his window, so why does Lan have it? Lan asks him what he means, and Wrath explains he made the system, so why is it with him? Lan asks why he made it, and Wrath says he isn't answering. But Lan understands it's to gauge progress, and Wrath is surprised. Then Lan punches through him, and says he hit him with mana just in case. But it assures he doesn't have a physical form, since nobody has come in despite the ruckus. So only he can probably see him. He shoos Wrath away, until he says enough. Then flies at Lan, and goes to his wrist turning into a flower bracelet. Wrath says it hasn't been long since his seal was lifted, but once he regains power it's Joe over. Lan says he wants to get rid of him ASAP, but that might remove the system too, and who knows what he would do to Sylvia. So he will keep him close, and restrict him so he can grow faster. Then he asks why he's a flower bracelet, and Wrath says to respect his preferences. Lan agrees. Then the next day we see Helen comforting Sylvia. As Lan comes down the stairs, saying he's ready, and he will be heading off now to the training hall. They tell him not to push himself too much, and he tells them he will be careful. Helen asks Sylvia if she's going to send him off with such a sad face. She tells Lan she believes in him. He tells her not to worry, and he'll give up if it's too difficult. He waves and leaves. Sylvia wonders if he'll be okay. Well, he is much better now, he is still sick. Helen tells her that Lemur has the best insight of all the Z-cards, and she's sure he'll be fine. We see she was bawling again seeing him off. He reminds her he'll run if it gets tough. She decides to trust in him. Praying he comes back unhurt, and he walks off. At the training hall we see a lot of kids. Since it's not just the Z-cards family, but also other students from outside. According to Helen, there are a lot of people this year, so the 6th hall is also helping. We see some kids trash-talking him for being a disgrace, even taking a shot at Wrath's bracelet. Wrath says he'll rip their eyeballs out. Lan says instead of buzzing behind people's backs, they need to say it to his face. They say someone of the indirect bloodline shouldn't talk, and he says they aren't either, so why are they yapping, and the tone they are using are for those below them. One of them grab his collar, and readied their fist, and Lan is ready to clap back. And another kid says to stop. It's the burn kid from earlier on saying the outsiders are putting shame on the family name. They back off out of fear, and Burn tells Lan to learn his place. And he's nothing more than dust, so if he doesn't want to be kicked out, lay low. Since back then getting Glenn's attention was just luck, and he used the situation to his advantage, and a loser will fail the training. He tells Lan if he isn't going to behave to leave, since he won't pass. Lan says he sure likes to spout bullshit, then asks what he is, saying the only thing he has is direct lineage, so what right does he have to talk to him? Then says he understands if he runs to Daddy. Burn gets angry, then Lemur kicks the door open as they go to talk, and he says they are already fighting. Lan recognizes Lemur, saying he didn't expect him to be here. Burn clicks his tongue and leaves. Lemur then introduces himself to them all. He says he heard there are 160 people, and that's way too many. So he's going to reduce the numbers down to a quarter. The students begin to get scared. Wrath says he'll rip the L's ears off, and Lemur says his word here is law. If they have a problem they can talk to Glenn. Then asks what they are waiting for in Turan. Some of the kids mentally check out, then they start hauling cheeks. Wrath asks Lan why he's running all the way in the back. He says it's not a competition, and there's no need to get past those guys. He says Lemur looks at others' potential and temperament. The winner of the test is the one who endures until the end. We see Sir Burn and Lady Runin are at the front. The people watching say well everyone is fast, they are especially so. They are only 12, yet they are already at the level I'm scared to see what they'll be like in the future. Then they see Lan, gassed out in the back, but say that he's sick so it's amazing he can handle this much. Lemur begins to smile, saying it's interesting, as he's never seen someone like this before. He explains how he thought the humans whose talents he couldn't calculate were the continent's strongest, as he couldn't see the depths of their power. He can see most of the children's futures, but Lan he cannot sense anything. Which means he's stronger than he is, and out of his reach. The kids from earlier say it's funny the arrogant one is in last place, he'll soon be failed. Lan says there's no way, they're just running even though it's meant to be training. He explains how in his past life he would run like hell from beasts. This is just way too easy. They continue just running. Lemur wonders how he's running since his stamina was exhausted long ago. It's way past the boundary of determination at this point. He wonders how he has the same kind of mentality as people who have trained to the brink of death. Burn turns around and sees Lan right behind him, wondering how he's running when he was meant to be sick. And he recalls overhearing the doctors talking about Lan's health, and he says it's annoying. Then he begins to utilize Aura, saying he'll show him how much better he is. He quickly takes first place, surprising Lan, but Runin doesn't seem fazed. Lan says he's still just a kid, but Runin is more mature than he is. Either way it's not a competition, it's a fee side quest to fight your own mental. After a bit most of the kids are gassed out, and they wonder how Lan is still running, wondering if he doesn't get tired. Lan says that's nonsense, since he feels like he's about to die. And he feels like his heart is about to collapse at any moment, but he's utilizing the ROF to squeeze out the last bit of his stamina. At the very least it's improving quickly, and he needs to activate it at its full force to feel the effects. As he's happy, Wrath says this is pitiful that his future vessel is in such a state, then tells him to hand over his body. Lan says not now, and Wrath says he'll freeze everything, then attacks Lan, making him feel a sharp pain in his body. He grits his teeth, saying he must endure his mind being taken over, and he needs to pretend nothing is wrong. He tells Wrath to stop, since it won't work on him. Wrath says nobody can withstand his rage, then he says let's see how long he can endure. Lan says he must endure, since if he shows any weakness, Wrath will swallow him whole. Wrath begins to mold, but Lan says he feels like he's about to die, and his body won't listen to him. His vision begins to blur, and he starts to lose his breathing. He wonders if it's his limit, then Lemur says it's enough. Lan begins to pant, and Runin stares at him. Wrath asks how he withstood it, and Lan says he warned him it wouldn't work. But he's happy it grew his ROF, and his physical strength too. A window appears saying he's received experience, and Wrath asks how this is possible, saying this is stupid. Lemur congratulates everyone, then says what he mentioned before the test was just a lie to get everyone motivated. But if they show the same results as today they will fail. Out of all of the 160 today, only one of them ran until the absolute end. Some people used Aura to cheat. Well, he doesn't care how they do it, since they are the ones taking the test. But if they do as he says, they won't fail the test. He says now they just need to pass the test in 6 months to become official trainees. And he will pick the top trainees, but he won't be ranking them. He says they can go to their dorms now, and visit the training center. We see Lemur going into the woods, running into Glenn. He tells him he's in his napping spot, and Glenn asks him what's Poppin. Lemur says he saw the test for himself, so why ask, and he knows how great his eyes are, and Runen and Burn are talented, but they knew that. Some of the other kids too, but he can't sense anything in Lan. He was also out of stamina, so how did he keep running? It's the first time after Glenn he hasn't been able to sense something. And his life has been boring ever since his core was ruined, but now it's interesting. Glenn tells him he chose to be an instructor, so don't forget his duties. He says of course, since he thinks he found someone he can leave his future to. Glenn says it's a coincidence since Lan can't become a martial artist. Lemur smiles saying he knows it isn't a coincidence too. Lan says since that's over he'll head to the training center. Wrath says he doesn't know when to stop. The other kids look at him with pure disdain. They talk amongst themselves, saying it's impossible and there's no way he held on that long, and surely he cheated. We learn one of the kids is named Crane, who suggests he took some kind of miracle medicine, and he heard the Saint of Rags gave him one a long time ago. Crane says on that note, they need to teach him a lesson. We see Lan being thrown into a tree, who asks why they are doing this. One of the random kids barks at him for cheating with a miracle medicine, and his boy backs him up, saying he's using dirty tricks. They tell him not to be scared, they are just here to talk. Crane tells him that these things happen often. Then he goes to punch at Lan, and Wrath asks if he's just going to take this shit. Then Lan just clocks Crane in the face, surprising the other kids. And even Wrath. Lan says if they just want to talk, let's fucking talk. Random number 2 punches at him, and he blocks it and kicks him in the stomach. The other kid asks what he's doing, then gets socked in the face too. And while Crane is down, he kicks him again. Wrath says he's doing well, and it was fun to watch. Then he goes back and hits the other kid in the face again. They fall onto the floor and complain, and Crane apologizes. But Lan puts his feet onto his hands, saying before he stops he has one thing to ask. The Mask's Burn was the one who made them do this. Crane says no, and they did this without Burn knowing. He says that's unexpected, he thought he hated him. But he guess he's not that far gone. He says alright, he assumes he won't go around telling others about their conversation. Lan grabs onto his hair, saying he better avoid him if he doesn't want to have another conversation. Crane says he won't even step on his shadow, and apologizes. Lan says if he understood, then fuck off. We see Lemur watching this, smiling in the background, saying it was nice to watch that, it was like seeing young Glenn. We see that Wrath was satisfied with his actions, and increased his agility, but Wrath is confused by this. Lan says he's the one who made it. Wrath says he didn't expect it to be taken away from him, and that he's just stealing it from him. Lan says is that so, and Wrath asks for him to show some gratitude. Then says he has an offer for him, and he would like to bet on something. If he wins he will give him all of the X, and if he loses he will accept his rage. We see it's for him to pass as a top trainee, and if he wins he will get a trade option, and he asks about it. To which Wrath tells him he'll be given one of his traits. Lan then asks what the rage penalty is. And Wrath says he'll just take some rage he possesses, and while it's not a lot, with enough he won't be able to control himself anymore. Lan recognizes what he's aiming for, and says since he usually behaves, he doesn't believe he's lying. Plus the rewards for winning are much greater than the risks. He then accepts the bet, and Wrath says that's a good choice. He says if he utilizes his past life, he will not lose. The next day we see the kids are all gassed out, and Lemur explains that the horse stance pose is the building blocks for all martial arts, and he's not forcing them to stay in it, since they are taking the test, not him. They begin to complain, asking how it helps with swordsmanship. Burn tells them to stop complaining, and they can just go practice swordsmanship now. Lan watches them leave. Wrath asks if he'll join them with their swordsmanship practice, and Lan says he doesn't need to, as it's a waste of time to train swordsmanship when you're not trained in the basics. And what he needs now isn't a sword, but basic physical strength. His body is weaker than others due to the Bittercult curse, and basics are the most important, since they will build a solid foundation. He doesn't need to feel rushed, so he will just focus on his body for now. We see while he's doing some exercises, Runen is watching from afar, and she's talking about how the weight he's lifting is increasing daily, and while it's a given you can improve daily, the weight going up daily is nonsense. Then she wonders if he has a different aptitude when training, then wonders how he's so consistent. She starts to approach them, saying there's something about him. She stands before him, then he asks why she is here. But she just NPC stares at him. Lan asks why she's here, and they continue their awkward stare down. Runen wonders what's making him grow so much, then she realizes something about Lan, then she walks past him, and sits down, and starts bench pressing. He goes to leave, and she follows him. He goes to curl, then she continues to follow him. She says it's not her imagination, ever since she smelled something earlier, her body has felt lighter, which allowed her to lift heavier weight than usual. Lan asks her if she has something to tell him. She says no, then he begins to walk away. And she decides to follow him for a bit more, to which she does. Burn and some other kids enter the training hall and sees Runin following Lan, then they wonder why she is following him. Burn says Lan is wasting his time doing repetitive training, while Lan needs it, he is on a different level than them. And while he doesn't know what the test is, it's better to train swordsmanship for their own martial prowess, so don't waste time with Lan. After a bit while Lan is still curling, another kid comes up to him, then introduces himself as Dorian, asking if he can train with them. And that he wants to learn the correct posture. Lan says that's fine. Dorian thanks him, then begins to search through his bag, then hands him a cookie, saying it tastes good. He goes to give it back, then notices that Runin is eyeballing. She starts making beady puppy dog eyes. And he hands her the cookie, causing her to munch on it. They then help Dorian bench press. Then the days start to fly by, with them constantly training. It's been around 6 months since they started, and every day he ran until he couldn't anymore. And eventually the backs of everyone he saw while running were no longer there and were replaced by only Runin and Burn's book. Eventually the day of the test came around. We see everyone pulling up and filling out the bleachers of the stadium. Wrath then makes sure Lan remembers the bet they made, because in the end he was unable to surpass the two of them, so he needs to get ready to take his rage. Lan tells him the test is different, so they don't know how it will end. He then spots Dorian cosplaying as Mineta. When he goes to comfort him, Runin pulls out a cookie saying to eat it. He says he's fine, and then Burn stares him down, making him wonder why he's around so many weirdos. Sylvia and Helen are watching, and Sylvia feels proud, saying he looks confident, and made friends too. They also discuss how he's light-hearted and has a warm personality. Sylvia smiles, then the mood shifts once Glenn enters. People are surprised that he's attending a training ceremony, even Lemur asks about it, and Glenn says it's an event that chooses the future, so why wouldn't he be here? Lemur says he's more than welcome, and since he's here now he'll stop wasting time, so they can proceed with the test right away. He starts to announce the details of the test, then he gives a serious glare, and a green aura bursts from around him. It scares all of the kids, then he tells them they must make it through his aura, and that is the test he has given them. He tells them that aura is inherent to martial artists, and the test will judge their worth as a martial artist. So No Name says he has an issue with it, and the children just started learning aura, so why is this his test? Some of the other parents begin to agree with him, then Lemur sighs, saying it's not just a manifestation of aura, and a real aura burst is based on the level of their soul, and is proof that you're a martial artist. The guy starts to ask what he's talking about, and Glenn interrupts him saying he's not wrong. Even if people hadn't learned aura, individuals possess their own aura burst based on their effort. Lemur smiles, and Glenn says that depending on the intensity of the training, someone without a strong aura can have a strong aura burst. Lemur says surely nobody has any complaints now, right? He calls Runin to the front, saying everyone else should step back. He tells her that the aura burst he will give her is a level she can endure if she trained properly, and all she must do is touch him to win. He smirks, then says it's time to begin, and he releases his aura toward her. She makes a pained face, and he tells her it's an automatic fail if she uses aura. So use sheer willpower and push through. She begins to slowly take steps forward toward him, stretching her hand out she grabs onto his arm. He pats her head, saying easy pass, and he sees how hard she's trained, and continue with the same effort. He then calls up Dorian. Lemur tells him he saw how Runin did, just do the same thing. And if he can't do the same thing he will fail, then he releases his aura again. Dorian starts to reel from it, and drops to his knees. Lan realizes that he changes the intensity of the burst depending on the kid, and to be able to do this, it means that he's been observing every single kid. Dorian passes, and Lemur tells him his confidence is too low compared to his skill level, so he should believe in himself. Dorian agrees by vomiting, then Lemur calls for the next student, and eventually we see it's Burn's turn. Lemur says he's starting, then the aura bursts away from him, and Burn is surprised that this is what the others went through. Wondering how Runin did this, he drops to his knees. Lemur tells him that his talent is special, more so than anyone, only a few can compare, but he and the children who followed him around just wasted their time, so what's the point in training swordsmanship without the basics? Lemur reminds him he used aura anytime he struggled, but he would fail doing it now. Burn says he can't fail here, and he can't forget how his dad looked at his brother. The day he kicked him out, he looked so cruel. Burn turns his fear into willpower, then he dashes in and passes by grabbing Lemur's leg. Lemur tells him he isn't an adult and to train what he is meant to like everyone else. Then he sighs and says it's Lan's turn. Lan starts walking forward. Lemur asks if he's ready, to which Lan says yes. Then Lemur starts, but this time the aura burst is significantly larger than it was for anyone else. Even the people watching realize this, Glenn too. Lan asks if this is really his test, then Lemur says he saw that the talent he has is way above Burn and Runin. So try enduring it. Lan explains that the quality of the soul is not just in the body, and inside of him isn't just the quality of Lan Z-card, but for the 12th time, of Lan the greatest assassin too. Lan starts to walk through the aura, surprising both Lemur and Glenn that he's effortlessly walking through it. Lan stretches his hand out and touches Lemur to his astonishment, or well, not just him, but everyone watching as well, even Glenn. Lan smiles, saying it's over now, right? The other kids are asking how he made it through that. Burn's dad is curious too. Lemur is speechless for a moment, then calls out to Lan, asking what he is. Lan says he's just Lan, and Lemur says he meant more about how he sent an outburst way above the level he could handle, and didn't think he could actually go through it. Lemur zones out for a second, then snaps back, saying he got a bit distracted, and now the test is over. He says he will also now announce the top trainee, which of course is Lan. Sylvia and Helen both begin to cry with joy, and the students talk about it. Then Burn says he refuses to accept this, it has to be a lie. Lemur asks what he's talking about. Burn starts acting like the child he is, and says that Lan is worse than him in every regard. He refuses to accept him as the top trainee, and he's sure he played a trick. The other kids start talking about it, saying it's true, and that maybe Lemur was in on it. Burn says since they are a martial arts family, he thinks the top trainee should be chosen through a duel, rather than a test like this one. Lemur chuckles, then says it seems like Burn really wanted the top trainee spot, but the test is already over, then asks Glenn what he thinks should be done. He thinks about it, then tells Lan that it seems like people cannot accept the results. Asking if he's willing to duel Burn, Burn grins waiting for a yes, but Lan firmly says no. The test is over, and the results are here, and there's no reason to duel if there isn't a reward. Then he tells Burn that he always talked about honor and lineage, but he didn't expect him to be in such denial over the results. Glenn says that if they duel, the winner will be given a bronze plaque. This piques Lan's interest, then he explains how there are tiers for plaques, and you can get rewards based on the tier of plaque earned. Since Glenn is giving it, he is sure that the rewards will be pretty good. Lan agrees to this, then Glenn says it's time to decide who the top trainee really is. He explains the rules. It is 1 round, and you cannot use weapons or war, only their bodies. They square up, then Lemur waves his hand saying it's time to begin. Burn quickly charges in and punches at Lan, but he dodges it, then Burn follows up with a kick, but he blocks it too. Burn then says he'll use the ability his father taught him and prepares his attack. Lan blocks it again. But Burn continues his attacks, and starts inner monologuing about how weak Lan is, and saying he'll take the top trainee spot no problem. Then has a PTSD flashback of his brother being disowned, and how his father doesn't want him to disappoint him. Burn uses this as fuel, and says he will not let himself fall behind Lan. He continues attacking at Lan, but has yet to actually land a single blow. He gets close to his face once. Then Lan says he can see all of the kids' attacks perfectly clear. Burn then charges in saying this is the end of him and jumps into the air, but Lan readies his fist, then says try me. We see that he is using the same technique as Burn, and their fists collide with one another, but Burn is knocked back, which surprises him. Then Lan continues to beat him with his own ability, causing people to freak out, asking how he used the tiger fist. Burn even asks him how he did it, and Lan tells him he just showed him it, so he copied it like some homework. The audience begins to speculate that maybe Lan learned it in secret, and refuses to admit this happened. Lemur, watching all of this unfold, realizes that Lan is really him. He says that Lan countered Burn's technique by having the flow spin in the opposite direction, and being able to see flow makes you a genius. But being able to make it your own like that, he has the talent to be the strongest on the continent, perpetual talent. Lemur says the results are something everyone can see, and that with his victory the test is over. Helen runs down toward them, and tackles Lan with a hug. He begins to smile at this, and Wrath says to hurry the wholesome moment up. We see Runin's parents doing the same thing, but not Burn's as he only has Alfred. He makes eye contact with his dad, who goes to grab the milk, making Burn realize his father is disappointed in him. That night he goes to talk to him, and it's awkward silence until his father calls out to him, asking if he remembered what he told him. Burn says he told him to be the top trainee, and his dad says exactly. It wasn't much to ask for, but he still couldn't achieve it. And to top it all off, he lost to a lesser family member. He asks him if he wants to end up like his brothers, then says he lost his first chance, and he still has a chance to be the top trainee, then tells him to get out. Burn beats up the wall, then starts to blame Lan for all of this happening to him, then says that he tried too hard to not fall behind everyone else. That's cap, and he starts to just walk aimlessly. He looks up to see he somehow made it to the training hall. Saying he came here out of habit, he enters the building and sees that nobody is there. He then starts curling some weight, and looks over to see the shoe lockers. He sees Lan's name, then debates opening it, to which he actually does. Then is surprised by the absolute stench coming from the amount of shoes Lan has been through. He's surprised he's used so many shoes, because he himself has only used a few. He then turns around, and imagines Lan training. And he says now that he thinks about it, Lan was always training, even when he was skipping basic training, or when he was resting. Lan was persistent with his training, and that this is how Zekeheart should behave. He realizes he's been doing the opposite, but then spots that Lan forgot to re-rack his weights, and puts the shoes he was holding back into the locker. He closes the door and also leaves the weights unracked. As he's walking, he looks as if he's resolved himself to train properly. It cuts back to Wrath saying he doesn't believe it, and he's lived for so long, but never met anyone like Lan. Then asks what he is. Lan tells him to keep imagining. Then asks him what the skill he earned is. Wrath says it's called Legendary Senses, and explains how it expands the range of their senses, and it's only a 10% increase, due to it being tier 1, but it'll go up as he increases. Lan asks why it's called Legendary Senses, and Wrath says it just sounded cool. Then they banter for a bit, and then sleep. The next day Glenn has summoned for Lan, and Sylvia asks Alfred if there is a problem, to which he laughs saying no, it's because he will be handing him the plaque himself. We see Lan greeting him, and Glenn gets Alfred to present the plaque, and then he bestows it upon Lan, saying if he returns it later, he can request an item of the same value. Lan thinks about it, then says he wants to ask for something now. This says his mother's name, asking what he needs to do for her to regain her position. Glenn is surprised, and Alfred is amused. Glenn says if he's asking about her direct lineage, he needs accomplishments, but it's not simple, and for a kid like himself it is nearly impossible. Lan says that means it's possible then hands the plaque back over, thanking Glenn for answering. He begins to walk away from them, but Glenn tells him to wait, saying he hasn't asked for a reward yet, and he could have asked him that without the plaque. Lan is a bit taken aback, and Glenn asks him what he wants. Lan says he knows what he needs the most now, then says it's a training technique. Glenn says that Lemur will teach him one, to which Lan says he wants one better than that, something that is of equal worth to a bronze plaque. Lan explains how the technique he used in his past life is not enough, and in order to get Sylvia her lineage back, and to kill Dareth, he needs a better one. Glenn says if it's a training technique, then snaps his fingers. Which makes a library appear, and books start spawning everywhere around Lan. We see they are very high up, and completely encase him. Lan asks what this is, and Glenn says it's some of the books of their family. Then instructs him to place his hand in the center, and the book he needs the most will come out. Lan says alright, then thinks about what he wants, and a faint sun-like aura accesses his hands. We see an old book start to unshelve itself, then opens above him in the sky. Glenn is shocked, so is Alfred. Glenn even shouts, wondering why it's that book. As it opens above Lan's head, it descends until its eye level, and Lan wonders what kind of book it is, then touches a page. Causing the book to start flipping the pages, then they start to fly out, and the golden aura from before emerges from the book. The pages fly all around Lan's head, and Glenn just watches. Then recalls how he was being told in the past of how his daughter was being treated. And he ignored it all, saying that since she left for a man, they can stop reporting any matters about her to him. He says in the past he used to believe that emotions are useless, and he only worried about his family's power, then attained transcendent martial prowess. Along with the most powerful family, but at what price? He's informed of his granddaughter and son-in-law dying, but that Sylvia is fine from the ambush. At that moment Glenn regained his emotions, but it was too late since he cannot turn back time. And he recalls the grief he felt. He says even if Sylvia and Lan hate him now, he will protect them. The book finally stops busting out pages, and Lan says it's weird, he just felt stuff flowing into his head. Then Glenn calls out to him, asking what he just did. Lan says he doesn't know, but he just learned the contents of the book. Glenn asks what the name is, and Lan holds his hand out, and tells him it's called the Thousand Flames technique. Glenn asks if he said he remembered the contents. Lan says yes. Glenn says alright, and now he's gotten his rewards, he is excused. Lan exits the room, and Albert asks Glenn about the training book that he took. Glenn says it's the training technique of the first ever patriarch, and that nobody has been able to take it nor read it in the clan's history. Albert says if this gets out, it might put him and Sylvia in danger. Glenn tells him not to trip, as nobody knows of the technique. Albert asks about the book disappearing, to which Glenn says someone learned it, so it's fine. And the technique wasn't usable anyway, so if it wasn't for Lan, it would just keep rotting on the shelves. And he thinks things will change quite a bit. Lan wonders why Glenn gave it to him, since a gold plaque was equal in value. It's not lacking at all, even compared to the ROF, he says, but then we see him trying to mentally grasp onto the fire, but fails. He says he can't collect ore even though he's trying, and he didn't think it would be easy to learn a technique of this level. Rath says it looks like things aren't working out the way he wants, and if anyone interrupts him during this he would end up disabled, which is a shame since he just got a great technique. Lan says that Rath is right, then explains how if he gets messed up, it could permanently ruin the mana circuits. It's especially dangerous for him since he has the Bittercult curse. Lan says if he knows that, then don't interrupt him. Rath says they'll see about it, and Lan says wait. Rath starts to smile, saying he'll interrupt him just once while he trains. Lan says then he will end up with a damaged body, so it's a loss for him too. Rath says doesn't care, and ratio. He wouldn't be able to overcome it since he's human, but Rath can always repair the body to use. So when Lan becomes unable to use his energy core and he gives up, then he will be able to take it. Lan says if he's just going to do it once, he'll look forward to it. Rath says he shouldn't pretend to be tough, and should be afraid since he doesn't know when he'll do it. Lan recognizes him as an enemy, saying he'll jump at the first chance to take over his body. He thought he gave up since he didn't try anything recently, but he should remain on alert. He decides to worry about it later, saying he has more urgent things to take care of. Rath asks if he's going to do it now, and Lan says yes, since she comes every night, so he'll take care of it, and it's been a while since he's worked. He sees his maid crouching by the river. We see her writing a paper, explaining how there's nothing unusual to report. It's Judil, the annex maid, and she says she never thought he would get such a valuable training technique with just a bronze plaque. Also, the mana flow she felt while he was training was out of the ordinary. She begins to write it down on the paper, saying even if it's her orders, he is a child, so how long will she need to do this? She puts it into the river, and as it starts to drift she sighs. As she goes to leave, a knife is held to her throat, and Lan tells her if she opens her mouth, she will die, or if she moves too. He tells her to look down at the water. She wonders who it is, asking who can possess such bloodlust. Then she sees in the reflection that it's Lan. She wonders how he snuck up on her. He tells her he's been feeling her eyes on him since he came back. He asks if she got the information she wanted. She's surprised he knew about her from the start, even though she didn't leave any traces. Why was he pretending not to know? He tells her to open her mouth, and then he feeds her some pill thing, and shoves it down her throat. She starts to gag and cough, then he takes the note out of the water. He says that he can't see the contents, so he needs something to make it visible. He starts to name out all of the elements, then she reacts subtly to one of them, and he realizes what it is. She asks how he knew, then starts to do the same thing with names. Then he figures out that it's Karun, and she says it's impossible he knew. That her face didn't change, and she's been trained for years. She starts to recall the symptoms she felt from what he made her eat, and says there's only one explanation, and that it's the rage worm she ate. She asks if he fed her rage worm. He's surprised she knew about it, saying that's unexpected. She starts to gag and tries to vomit it up. She says it's the worst curse that not only lets the person know of the other's emotions, but can also kill them with an intense amount of suffering. She begins to cry, and he tells her that sending a letter must mean she's a spy, and he assumes the plan began during the judgment ceremony. He compliments how detailed the report is, and it also includes information about his mother and the other maids. She says she thought it was an easy mission, since he's just a child, and Sylvia has a broken core. But he's not just a child, he's a monster. She tells him she will change the contents immediately and put some false information down. He says there's no need, since the information will be leaked eventually, and it would prove she is unskilled. He crouches in front of her and smiles, saying from now she's a double spy. She can give away information that others will find out about, and hide the important stuff. And to also bring him information he should know about. She says she understands, then he nods at her. He says he hopes the next time she's back, that she will have some useful information. Wrath asks when he summoned a rage worm. He says he wouldn't use something that cruel, and it was just a pill that causes pain. He asks how he read her thoughts without the help of the worm. He says information can be gained from all kinds of things. Wrath shudders, then calls him a monster. Lan says after all of this he started to focus on his aura training, and soon enough it was time to go back to the training hall. We see that Judiel is still scared of him. At the training hall, Lan is surprised to see around 40 kids passed, saying Lima really only left behind a quarter. He then hears Runan say his name. He turns around and she just walks up to him and stares at him. She then recalls her mother asking if she thanks Lan for helping her with training, and she says she thanked him for the cookie, but not for the actual training. Her mother asks why, and Runan says Dad said she should never talk to a guy first. Her mother realizes how bad he messed up, then explains to her that sex doesn't matter when it comes to expressing gratitude. And as she received help, she should say thank you, and that's just manners. She tells her to thank him properly, then the flashback ends, and she says thanks to Lan. Both he and Wrath are confused about this, but she is proud of herself for saying it. Then they hear Dorian, and he's asking Lan how he's been, and he's super gassed out for some reason. Then he hits him with a wall of text. Even Wrath says that's too damn much. He keeps talking, then Burn appears behind him, causing him to get jump scared. Burn walks up to Lan, then they awkwardly stare at each other. Burn then bows saying he admits that he's sorry, and he was acting pathetic, but he hasn't given up. And he will try hard to surpass him, so be prepared for it. Then he walks away, and Lan says for a 13-year-old to admit he was wrong, he guesses it's a renowned family for a reason. Wrath starts to shit-talk him, and Lan says it's impressive. Lemur then says he's sorry for being late, and he drank a bit last night, so slept in. Then asks if they had a nice break. He says the real training will start today. The basics will be the same as last time, but now there will be a few regimens added. First will be aura training. The doors then slam open to interrupt him, and we see a woman saying the door gave her hard-ass time. Lemur says she wasn't his trainee, but she's a failure from last year, and they'll need to train with her. Her name is Martha Zekard, and she is of direct lineage. She sighs, then Lemur says she's actually nice, but she cuts him off asking who the top trainee is, because she hates having people worse than her be in a higher position than her. And she challenges the top trainee to fight. Lan wonders why he has bad luck, asking why he keeps getting involved with weird people. Then he introduces himself. Martha laughs, then says he doesn't look like he would be the top trainee, then says they should start right away. Burn tells her this isn't very dignified, and she stops walking forward and asks him what he just said to her. Then she gets into his face and says he better watch his mouth and choose his next words carefully. Burn says that Lan has proven himself as the top trainee when Glenn and Lemur were watching, so is she denying that? She says she heard he was denied, and mocks him. He tells her that is why he's saying this, and he doesn't want to see anyone else be that pathetic like he was. Lan realizes that Burn really has changed. Runan then steps up and tells Martha to go away. Martha laughs saying that's funny, asking if they are his minions or something. She starts to walk away, saying she'll feel stupid if she keeps pushing in this situation. She says that she hates cowards who hide behind others more than arrogant bastards, and leaps at Lan. The rest turn around, but it's too late. She's already preparing her attack. But he quickly parries it, and prepares to show her equal rights, equal lefts. He lets her block it, then she flies away. Burn is surprised, and Lemur just smiles. Even Martha is shook, and she starts to get pissed, asking what the hell, and then she starts to channel her aura, saying he's not going to walk home today. But Lemur stops her fist, and she's surprised. He says she's underestimating him a bit too much, and even if he isn't scary, it's upsetting to be treated like he's invisible. He tells her that Lan hasn't learned aura yet, saying it'd be cheating if they fought now. And she can do it later when he's learned aura. She says she was gonna stop anyway. Then Lemur tells Lan to get back to his spot too. Wrath barks at him for not beating her ass, and he tells him he got a hit in at least. Wrath says that's not enough. Lan says it's not time yet. It's more beneficial to bet over the top trainee spot. So just wait, and he will get revenge later. In the training hall, we see everyone practicing, then they get told it's break time. Burn is tired, saying that it's not easy. Well, it wasn't hard up to the second level. From the third onward it's difficult. But on the other hand, Lan has started from scratch, and didn't even take a month to learn it. Well, it took Burn a month to learn the form. At this rate, he'll move on to swordsmanship training at the same time. He says he doesn't look like the only person who feels rushed, and he asks Martha if she's being chased too. She says damn it and stops swinging, saying it must be Lan's first time learning these techniques, but he's improving so quickly. It's not like he can know them like Burn or Runin, and his body cannot be in a normal state because of the bitter cold curse too. So how can he train daily? She says she cannot fall behind. She explains how everyone praised her talent. She explains how ever since she was adopted into the Zeekarts, she was always being Chaz. She always laughed at them since she is a genius, the best of the best. That is who she was at least. But now she's so anxious she cannot deal with it. She leaves the training hall, and her own Alfred tells her good work today. She says yes, and he tells her not to feel so worried. And that Lan has been surprising many people, but he can't win against her. She asks what he means, and he says that Lan has a critical weakness that he cannot overcome. It jumps to Lan swinging his sword and seeming a little gassed out, and some other students walk up to him, asking if he can check out their forms. He tells them no, and go ask Burn instead. Then Martha pulls up acting hella sarcastic, giving him fake compliments, calling him a genius. Then she starts to drop her tone and starts to yap about how bad his mana sensitivity is, so his talent is wasted. She says he could maybe become an instructor for swordsmanship. Everyone stays silent, and Martha looks proud, saying that's what she expected, since nobody expected him to not have learned Aura after 4 months. She recalls her Alfred telling her that Lan has 0 talent, and it was before she was adopted, but during the judgment ceremony, Lan was at the bottom of the barrel in regards to mana sensitivity. He's the only person in the training hall to not have learned Aura. With a bronze plaque like he has, it means he's only gotten an intermediate technique, so it's only a little better than what everyone else starts with. Seeing as how he has yet to master a training technique, surely the results of the judgment ceremony were right. He can be the most talented person in the world with the sword, but if he cannot attune his aura, then he cannot become a real martial artist. Martha is still mad she lost to him. She goes to have another cliché thought, then sees Runin, and asks if she has something to say. Runin tells her to go. Martha asks if that's all she has to say, and Runin just repeats it. Martha says she was leaving anyway, and Humble brags about being from the direct bloodline. Runin doesn't care. It skips to later that night in the training hall. Lan sighs, saying that's enough for the day, but he smiles, saying how fun it is. He once again mentions he was the greatest assassin, so he had no time to learn anything else than killing. So he's really enjoying the experience. Rage is hella angry. He just sat there when Martha was yapping. Then Lan tells him he wasn't able to hear her, since he was locked in. Rage says he would have killed her, but Lan says he told him before there is no benefit to fighting her, and he could easily defeat her. He opens the door to see Runin. She's holding something. He asks her why she's here, and she opens the box to reveal some kind of food. She tells him to eat, then tells him again. He goes to eat it. Once he eats it, he is surprised. Rage starts to talk about how he's never eaten something so sweet, and starts to fly around like a happy kid, while Runin asks Lan how it was. He tells her it was good, and then she tells him it was ice cream that he just ate with his hands like an actual freak. Then she walks away. He wonders if she was worried about him. Since she has such a sweet tooth, she must have saved the last one for him, which would have been hard for her. He smiles, saying he'll repay her later. He finally goes back and Judiel hands him a letter. He asks what they want. She tells him about how they ordered her to look into him more, due to how fast he developed his skills, but they lost interest, since he hasn't been able to use Aura. He asks about his mother. Then Judiel tells him they lost interest in her too, so they might pull her back in. He realizes that's not good. Then she asks if he hasn't learned Aura yet on purpose. He plays dumb and asks her opinion. She apologizes and says never mind. Then she takes her leave. Rage says it's only normal to assume what she thought, and asks how he's having such a hard time with it. He tells Rage that he doesn't know and it's time to train. Rage asks if they can just sleep instead. Lan says training will make Aura easier to use. Then is surprised when he sees Lemur outside playing with some birds. Lan calls out to him, and Lemur asks if he slept well. After asks why he's here, Lemur says it's to tutor him. He puts his hand on Lan's shoulder, saying he'll tell him what his attribute is. In the woods we see them walking. Lan asks them why they are hiking. Lemur tells him to stop whining and wait, since he's a goated teacher. Lan asks how he'll learn about attributes here. Lemur smiles and thinks about how when he first saw his training technique, it was as if he saw flames so strong they were magma. It was very different than ordinary techniques, how boldly he accepted the cold in his body along with the flames. If Lan can truly master this method. He then smiles and turns around, saying that this should be far enough. Lan looks around, asking why they are in the middle of the forest. Then Lemur uses his wind to fly past Lan. Lemur says that he wanted to make a blade out of wind to protect his lord, and the air he is feeling now is the wind he chose. Lan looks down as Lemur explains that he weakened it just to give him a sample. It's a wind Lemur has felt since he was born, and due to Lan's mana circuits being filled with cold, it'll be rough. But there are many types of winds, warm, cold and so on. Lemur wanted a blade to pierce through anything, and he achieved it. Now all Lan needs to do is find his, so think of the fire he wants to possess. Lan tells him that unless he sets a fire to the woods he can't see proper flames. Lemur says they can't do that, but there's a perfect place around here for him. They arrive at a forge, and Lemur calls out to an old man. Lan asks where they are at, and Lemur tells him this is the place he can feel the flames. It's an artisan's charcoal pit. The old man asks what Lemur brought into his house. Lemur says he's the patriarch's grandson. And the old man says he doesn't care for formalities as he's retired, so unless the patriarch himself is here, but then gets interrupted by Lan's thoughts as he's surprised by the fire he's witnessing. He says he's seen it multiple times in his past life, from campfires to the fires of mages. But they don't compare to the flames he sees now. This is the ideal image of the flames he'd like to possess. Then the old man lessens the fire, and introduces himself as Valken. He tells Lan if he wants manners he can go elsewhere. Lan recognizes the old man's name as a famous artisan who is hella famous. He's the one to have created Glenn's sword, but he vanished 30 years ago. Lan bows his head saying it's nice to meet him. Valken then asks Lemur if there's anything he wants to say about Lan, but he says no, then explains who Valken is. He's retired now, and he's done nothing but keep the flame burning here, which is why Lan was brought here. Was to feel the real flames. Valken asks why he just didn't take Lan to another blacksmith's workshop. Lemur tells him there would be too many eyes, and others seeing his technique would be bad. Valken asks what he means, then Lemur explains how his mother is Sylvia. This sparks something in Valken, causing him to turn around and stare at Lan, who says he won't cause any trouble, he just wants to look at the flames. Valken tells him he's making charcoal, specifically golden charcoal which makes stronger flames than white or black. Which is what he's been doing for 10 years. He doesn't care what Lan does as long as he doesn't interrupt him. Lan gets happy then thanks him. We later see Lemur and Valken talking outside. Lemur says he didn't expect him to agree so easily. And if he's good to Lan he'll bring him some liquor later. Valken says it's not because of Lemur. The flames rose when they first entered, and it was strong enough to destroy the charcoal, so Lan's breathing is imbued with the ability to manipulate the flames. And if it's him, he believes that Lan can make his wishes come true. After 7 months of visiting Valken's furnace thinking about the imagine of the flame he wanted to obtain, he says he understands now how people say that fire is scary yet strong. But if properly controlled, a trained fire is more stable than the other elements. Also the Thousand Flames technique is also being awakened. He recalls Lemur's words of trying to imagine the fire he wants, so he starts to think about Dareth, how much he wants to kill him, how much he wants his mother to regain her title, and how the path to his goals is a darkness that doesn't even allow him to see his feet. He needs a light to guide the path. He needs his flames to be a sword to kill beasts, regardless of the weather, an unwavering flame. This is the flame that he wants. He begins to feel a stronger fire energy than usual. The heat of the furnace is pouring into him. He needs to lock in and catch the fire. He begins to wonder if he's feeling selflessness, as he sees the image he had of the flames. As he goes to concentrate more he feels a coldness in his hands. Rage says it's his turn now, and that he held him before, that he was going to wait for the moment he's at his weakest, and that it's time to freeze him. Lan is shocked realizing that he let his guard down. He forgot since it's been a while that Rage is a demon who wants his life. And a king at that. He starts to feel as if his body is breaking into pieces, and it's being hard to breathe. But if he moves he will die. He needs to focus on his ore. He grits his teeth, saying he needs to think so he can live, but he begins to lose his consciousness. Rage smiles watching his struggle, asking if he thinks he can endure his power like before, but says it's pointless as his body and soul are his. All of his efforts till now were pointless, as he's no different from the man working on the furnace. But don't worry, as the revenge shall continue. Lan thinks about the furnace comment, and realizes it's all or nothing, since he'll die if he does nothing. Instead of absorbing the mana being heated by the furnace, he'll absorb the mana inside of the furnace directly, a stronger fire than ever before. When that can consume anything, he begins to take in the mana, making Rage ask what he's doing. Lan replies that he's struggling. Inside of the furnace we see the charcoal Valken is making, and when he opens his eyes he sees the heat is rampaging. He wonders what's going on as the fire grew so much, as he's never seen the flames so strong. He turns around asking what's happening to the furnace, and sees Lan meditating. Rather he sees him shivering in front of the fire, wondering how he's so cold. Valken approaches him asking if he's okay, asking why he's shivering and to say something. But Lemur appears, saying to leave him. Valken says that he might die, and Lemur tells him that there's nothing they can do, since they would kill him by bothering him. Valken asks if his shivering is part of the coldness he mentioned before, but of course it's too dangerous. Lemur just hopes that Lan will not die. Lan continues to struggle, and Rage tells him to stop fighting back, as there is no hope. Lan calls out his bullshit, since he's already died helplessly before, his meaningless past life he does not want to repeat. He reaches out towards the fire in his mind, and Vulcan yells that the heat is too strong, and at this rate it'll explode due to the sudden surge of heat. Lemur recognizes that all of the mana in the furnace is grouping in a single spot, and that Lan must be absorbing the mana. Lan lets out a primal scream as he grabs the fire in his mind, which creates a massive explosion that blows through the roof of the workshop. Lemur calls out to Lan, as does Vulcan, and they see floating around him his mana, or rather they see golden flames flowing around him. The status window appears again, saying he's learned the Thousand Flames technique, and other things about how his biblical curse has been changed, and has reached his 2 stars due to rage. Lan thinks to himself how things turned out better than he expected, and he didn't think he'd achieve this much. He gets another pop-up, saying that all of his stats will be increased as a reward for enduring rage's hardships. He wonders if it's a dream that he's receiving all of this, as it would have normally taken years. Rage awkwardly stares at Lan, and starts wondering how he managed to survive, even though his mentality was always at its limits. Lan says that he told him it wouldn't work, so don't try. Which we all know is just a bluff because our boy barely made it out of that one, even with plot armor. Vulcan asks him if he's okay, to which he says he's fine. Vulcan asks if he's learned aura now, and we already know the answer is yes. He then apologizes for breaking the furnace. Vulcan tells him that's fine as long as he's alright, since he can just make another one. Vulcan notices something and starts walking over to his non-broken furnace. He shoves his shovel inside and pulls out some golden charcoal. Vulcan becomes emotional, recalling all of the hate he was given by people who thought that golden charcoal was a legend, and he tells Lan it looks like he isn't the only one that's lucky, as he's gotten his golden charcoal, which he's been trying to make thanks to decades, all thanks to Lan. Lan goes to say he did nothing, and Vulcan explains how he trained here every day, and strengthened the heat all over the workshop. While he may be slow, he can still tell what he's done. Then he asks Lan what his goal is. Lan repeats it, and Vulcan asks what kind of swordsman he wants to be. Lan says he wants to become a swordsman that doesn't give up regardless of the situation he's faced with. Vulcan says he didn't expect for a kid to say that, but when the day comes and he is the type of swordsman he wishes to be, come back and find him, and he'll save the charcoal for that day. Lan says he thought he was retired. Vulcan says that people usually go back on their words of retirement, so don't die until then. Vulcan then sees him off and they go their separate ways. Lima peeping from above says he wondered what would happen, but it seems like he got his ore, and he's talented about making those worried about him. Then asks Glenn if he's right. We learn Glenn has visited every day, and now must feel relieved. Then they talk about how talented he is, which of course he's the main character. Glenn says it's not actually talent, but him turning his hardships into advantages. At the training hall we see Rinin with a box of candy wondering when Lan will come back. She starts to think about all the shit talking the other trainees have been doing about how it's been months, yet Lan still has no ore. She just wants to help him, since her mother said to give back to those who helped. For plot convenience, she hears the gate open and looks up to see Lan entering. She quickly runs up to him, while he argues with rage. He sees her and she gives him puppy dog eyes, and opens the box to reveal more ice cream, telling him to cheer him up. Then he picks it up and thanks her for the food, and she can tell that the cool air and even his scent has become more pleasant. He eats it, and rage starts popping out because of it. Lan tells him to calm down. He closes the box, telling her again it was good, thanking her. She asks if he wants any more. He tells her one is enough. Then she asks if he feels better now. He stares at her, then sighs while saying yes. Rinin smiles saying that's good, walking away happy. Lan smiles too, saying she's a mysterious kid. Later on stage, Lemur steps up saying he's planned something special for next month. Now it's time for them to move on to their energy cores. None of them know what he's talking about. Lemur tells them that they'll proceed with duels in a month. Martha looks excited as Lemur tells them all that the results of the duels will be ranked, so prepare thoroughly. Martha raises her hand saying to wait, then asks what about those falling behind, those who haven't created ore. They all glance towards Lan. Lemur notices this, so tells them all Lan succeeded. Martha is shocked, and turns around saying there's an opportunity and she's gotten bored of waiting. She walks toward him asking if he remembers what she said before, about not listening to those weaker than her. She tells him she's been patient enough, and he must have struggled while being in a position he isn't qualified for. She keeps yapping until Byrne tells her to back off, since it's been less than a day since he learned ore, but she has no honor trying to fight him. She starts to mock him, saying that honor is for those who deserve it. He goes to cut her off, but she continues saying even the useless ones learned ore within a month. But the top trainee took more than 6 months, which proves how he isn't talented. She's sure Byrne is aware as he was at the judgment ceremony with him, and a swordsman who hasn't learned ore cannot become famous. Isn't this the reason Lemur came up with the idea, was to change the top student? Lemur shrugs his shoulders saying he doesn't know. Martha goes back to calling Lan out, saying he's been top student for too long, even though it isn't deserved. So as she said earlier, they'll have a duel to decide. Lan tells her no. He asks if she thinks she can gamble without money. If she wants his spot as top, she needs to offer something equal in value. She asks if he still doesn't get the situation, saying there's nobody on his side. Then he asks if she's scared, and it takes her smooth brain a minute to register it. Then she asks what he just said. She laughs a little, then it gets uncontrollable. She says it's so amusing. She says she'll tolerate it, since she knows it makes sense. She pulls out a miracle medicine that strengthens the body and aura. She says if he wins he can have it, saying it should be fair. He asks Rage if he remembers what he said they needed to wait to body Martha. But now he can get something from her, so it's their chance. It jumps to a month later and Martha is looking at a calendar. She says it's finally a chance to get payback. She's never been hit before by someone her age until Lan. So it's a chance to get her payback after 8 months. She says that it's only been a month since Lan learned or he wouldn't be a match to her who trained for 3 years, right? Then she starts to talk about how she needs to hurry and become stronger, so she can save someone. Then she looks determined, saying it's the end of Lan. It skips to a bit later. Lemur is speaking to them all, saying that even watching a fight is helpful, so watch closely and imagine yourself in the situations. He calls up Burn and Dorian first, and Dorian raises his hand while shaking, then says he surrenders. Lemur and Burn are confused since it hasn't even started yet. Then Dorian starts to act like Usopp. Rage watches this and barks at him. Lan expected as much. Lemur then tells Dorian to try, saying he'll learn something at least. He agrees to try. Then a bit later we see Burn standing over Dorian as he surrenders again. Lemur tells Burn that he's still not controlling his emotions, and he could have won faster. Then he tells Dorian that he needs to stop being afraid, and if he fought properly he could have held on longer. Dorian says just too scared. The next match is called between Runan and Crane. The duel starts with Crane swinging at Runan's head. She watches as it gets close, then raises her sword parrying the attack. Surprising Crane, Lemur then says to stop, explaining that Crane is too nervous, and he must be relaxed. Also, how Runan did well, but didn't utilize enough ore. The duels continue on and on. All we're left to hear is the clashing of swords, as the trainees say Martha must have been tired of waiting. We see her unleashing a barrage of attacks onto Lan, and for some reason Lemur says their names to call them up. Martha slashes towards Lan, but he raises his sword, deflecting it. Martha watches as her hand flies into the air, then she looks a little shocked, but notices a slash coming at her, but backpedals to dodge it. She starts to laugh, saying she didn't think that he could deflect her sword, but that he's only talented in swordsmanship. Which is what she's said 40 times now. She keeps yapping like usual about how he can't use ore, while raising her sword into the air, channeling her poopy ore. She pushes off the floor, leaping towards Lan. She slashes down at him, but he blocks her attack, and it seems like it's tough. Martha asks how long he'll be able to block for, then keeps inner monologuing about how he's untalented blah blah. She goes to yap some more, but he swings at her, making her block it. He says she keeps talking about talent, and how everyone in this family must love talking about it. Martha says some ignorant shit about how he's untalented, and it's why she's here to him what talent looks like. He tells her that he'll show her something too, something more important than talent. He begins to release his golden aura, which surprises Martha, as Lance stands there while releasing more aura. Martha asks what's the deal with the flames. She realizes they are dangerous, but that there's something else, and that they are beautiful. She gets a little hesitant, then tightly grips her sword, saying it's time to take this seriously. She covers her sword in Dookie Aura, calling it the ultimate point. Lan recognizes it as the skill when all of your aura is put into one spot, saying it's impressive she can use it at her age. She admits that he's strong, but he cannot block this next one. She quickly dashes forward, releasing a strike at Lan. He retaliates with his own attack, causing their swords and aura to crash, destroying the ground. The other trainees watch in anticipation, wondering what's going on. We see a broken sword, along with Martha laying on the floor. They're surprised that she lost, and about Lan's aura. Lan acknowledges Martha as she won't even loosen the grip on her sword, saying she has something better than talent, and that she's got a strong mental. Later that night we see Glenn and Lemur talking about how Martha lost. Lemur talks about how impressive it was. Glenn says that Lan's aura was beautiful, along with how much force was behind it, so makes sure to guide him well. Lemur agrees, and then we'll learn that Martha is shocked and seems as if she's depressed, and he hopes she can overcome it. Sometime later we see a pretty flower that Lan is planting. Rage is barking at him to be gentle with it, threatening him. Lan says he's too weak to try. Rage says it's only because of Lan's resistance. which we learn that after he defeated Martha, the medicine she gave him increased his stats a lot, rather all of his effort until now finally took effect, including a resistance, so Rage's outbursts became a joke. Now he's out here to garden since it's his last day of rest. Rage continues to bark at Lan for how he gardens, and tells him to stop using the tool and use his hands instead. Lan wonders how Rage knows so much about gardening. Then we learn that in the demon realm, he tended to the garden often. As Lan listens, he then looks over to notice Martha. She doesn't say anything. Lan asks if she's here to pick a fight. She still says nothing. Lan wonders what she's thinking as she stares him down. Then she finally speaks, saying she'd like to fight him again. He says it's pathetic she won't accept her loss, but she says that she's not doing that, but she wants to understand how she lost. Then he asks her what he'll get in return. She's confused, and he explains how the loser must bring a gift when challenging the winner. She says that's bullshit, there's no point in paying to fight. He says that's what he wants. Martha tries to think of what to do, then looks over some flowers, wondering if she should step on them. Then she says it's surprising he likes flowers, but he tells her he doesn't really. Which surprises her. He adds how he doesn't like them, nor does he understand why others do too. He tells her he's only doing it for his mother. She clicks her tongue, then decides not to step on them. Then she turns around saying she'll be leaving, but then Lan's mother arrives as she's leaving, and asks who Lan's friend is, asking if he met her while training. Martha turns around to look at her. Sylvie recognizes who Martha is, greeting her. Lan tries to get her to stop, but she doesn't want to. She then asks her if she's heard anywhere from the duel with Lan. Martha tells her she's okay. Sylvia says she was worried, and she heard that Daniel brought in a talented child, but turns out she's pretty too. This makes Martha blush. Then Sylvia asks her why she's here. Martha awkwardly says she had to tell Lan something, but she was leaving. Sylvia then invites her to eat with them, while grabbing her hand. Martha tries to tell her to wait, then it jumps to them sitting at the table together. Lan wonders why Martha is being so polite, then Sylvia begins to brutally interrogate her. She's 15, so 1 year older than Lan. Sliva asks if she has any problems with the training. She says no. Sylvia then says well, their cooks are really good, the meat quality is worse than what Martha is used to, so it might be a bit chewy. Martha swallows it whole, then Sylvia puts her hand on Martha saying to chew properly. Martha recalls her mother saying this to her too, and how happy she was back then. She looks full of sadness, then thanks them for the food. She bows as she's leaving, and Lan wonders what the hell just happened, wondering if she ate something bad. As Martha's walking, she thinks about how Lan must think she's crazy, and how she couldn't say no to Sylvia, because it reminded her of her mother. Even though she looked so different from her, it was just like she was with her mom. We learn how her mother was kidnapped by the White Blood cult, and she was adopted by Daniel, and vowed to herself not to lose until she found her mom, and it's a promise she's kept until now. But it all shattered once she lost to Lan. She was adopted due to her talent, but she might get kicked out if she loses. Well, her dad is soft, it might have just all been an act, then she'll never find her mom. She grits her teeth, saying he wasn't meant to lose, then Alfred welcomes her back. He was waiting to deliver a letter to her that Daniel wrote. Martha is surprised her dad wrote a letter. It was written right after the duel. From the message we can see that her father is a very sweet man, reminding her that one loss doesn't make you a loser, and he'd like to comfort her, but his mission is taking longer than expected. He's still looking for her mother, and he won't give up. Martha tells Alfred to tell her dad she's thankful to him. Back in her room, she thinks about how pathetically she lost. It wasn't due to letting her guard down either. She realizes the only way to progress is to accept it and move forward, so she doesn't shame her father, so she starts to cut her hair to prove her conviction, in moving forward and letting go of her past. She looks in the mirror, saying that she'll become stronger. The next day we see the trainees wondering why Martha cut her hair. She approaches Lan, saying that she knows an apology won't make up for how she's acted, but she'll keep her promise. He asks what she means, then she says the one about the loser obeying the winner. Lan says that was unexpected. He didn't think she'd start acting so docile, acknowledging her changes, saying how mature she is. Then she immediately kicks Dorian in the stomach, and he realizes she only changed towards him. Eventually the new year comes around, which lead to a lot of character development. Martha's continued to obey Lan, Burin was more patient, and Runan became more precise. Lan as well continued to train daily. We see the other trainees being surprised by the main character's plot armor, since he learned a skill within half a day, even though he spent most of the time with his eyes closed. They even say his form is better than Lemur's, who we happen to see talking to Glenn about it. Saying that Lan used something called the Mind Realm, Glenn asks him why he does nothing but yap about Lan. Lemur tells him that he knows he's curious too. After saying this, Lemur looks down, noticing a lot of the employees seem busy. He asks Glenn if he's preparing for something, to which he says there are people visiting. The kingdom named Orwin is sending an envoy. It's one of the 6 emperors, 5 demons, whatever the titles were. They are close to the Zekarts, and also prioritize the sword and martial arts. Lemur asks who the envoy is. Glenn says it's meant to be the 3rd prince, but he thinks it's Duke Tartan. Lemur says that dude is a psycho, then mentions how the 3rd prince is the same age as Lan. Glenn says he doesn't know, but to make sure the trainees behave, since the guests will want to watch the training, so don't let them embarrass themselves. Lemur starts to think about how there will be kids close to Lan's age, and laughs saying it'll be amusing. It jumps to the trainees being told about duels with the Orwin's trainees. Lemur tells them that the 3rd prince wants to scrap. The kids seem scared, and he tells them that they should always be prepared to fight. One of the kids says that they were meant to visit the other training halls, and wonders why they are coming here. We get a flashback of Lemur going to talk to the Orwins. He tells him about how he heard of his disappointment, then tells him to visit his training hall. Flashback ends, and Lemur tells the kids that they'll be entering now, and calls the Orwins forward. They begin to approach, and we see the 3rd prince along with his group. He introduces himself as Grier de Orwin. Lan looks at him, saying he's strong for his age, since the presence he gives off is the strongest from the group. Lemur asks Lan if he's hesitant to duel with them. Lan thinks about how it'd be nice practice. He then tells Lemur he would like to duel them. Lemur says that since both sides have agreed, then to pick 20 people who would like to participate. Another important thing, he bet his entire salary on them winning, so they better do so. Lan forms a group of willing participants, telling them to take a look at the knights they'll fight before they start. He told them to look at the enemy's hands, and we can see them shaking. He tells them that the opponents are trainees just like them, so they must also be nervous. He explains how the intensity of their training doesn't fall behind theirs, and their effort will be shown today. So make sure that they just do their best. They all shout out of hype, and then Lan begins to pick the order they'll go in. And since the order is important, he'll send out the strong ones first, so he sends out Martha. He asks her if she can do it, to which she says yeah. Once Martha squares up with her opponent, the other trainees are scared because that dude does not look like he's 14. Her opponent introduces himself as Tars, and he says that he can tell she's trained properly, and he looks forward to the duel. The trainees start yapping about the size difference, saying that Martha won't be able to win, but she hit him with a gojo, saying nah, I'd win. We hear the sound of swords clashing, and Grier looks surprised, as he sees Martha overpowering Tars. He then brings up one of the other training halls, saying that they were strong, and lived up to the Zekhart name. Also they are comparable to the Kingdom's Knights, but the last training hall was just Dookie. They were lacking versus the Roberts family. But now he understands that this training hall is where the talented trainees are. Martha slashes at Tars, then it cuts to Lemur talking to the other instructor, who asks him if this is why he brought them here. He replies saying it's a rare occurrence for duels like this, and it'll be a good lesson. The other instructor says it's hard to believe Lemur is saying this. Lemur then proposes a bet about how they'll have 20 duels and reward the winner, saying that bets are more fun than just watching. The other instructor says his boys were given elite training, asking Lemur if he really believes his students can win. Lemur says it's good that he believes in his trainees, but that he has faith in his too. Back to Martha's fight, she's absolutely bodying Tars. She breaks his sword, making him realize it's Jover. He goes to ask how she's so strong, and then she uses the hilt of her sword to hit him in the stomach. Tar grunts and then falls to his knees as Martha is declared the winner. Lan says he thought she'd be softer in her swordsmanship after their duel, but she's gotten stronger instead. Martha asks Tars how he depends on his strength so much when he doesn't go all out from the start. Lan watches, saying it's amusing. Rage says nah, this is boring, then starts to rant about the demon realm, but Lan smacks him, saying to stay quiet. After quite a few matches, the next up is Runin and someone named Adelia. Lan tells Runin it's her turn. She nods, then approaches her opponent. Adelia says she dislikes her eyes, since she looks like there's nothing going on upstairs. Then she releases a fire aura. Runin says she doesn't like fire, while releasing her icy aura in retaliation. They then clash swords with each other, creating steam to form from the fire and ice colliding. We see Adelia preparing for something, then Runin appears behind her. Adelia slashes her in half. Then is surprised to find out it was an illusion. Then Runin's blade quickly appears beside her neck, which grants Runin victory in the match. Adelia admits her defeat, saying it was a good fight. Runin ignores her, then asks Lan if he watched the fight. He compliments her footwork, saying she did good. Then she sits down, thanking him. We learn from Lemur they have 9 wins and 9 losses, and now they'll continue with the 19th round. It's finally Burn's turn, and he's fighting someone named Saren. Saren introduces himself, as does Burn. Lan recognizes that Saren is strong, saying he's the strongest besides the prince. The match begins with Burn lunging forward. They exchange blows with each other. Byrne realizes they are similar in skill, saying he can't let his guard down, and he assumes Saren is thinking the same. They both let out some unnamed battle cries, and all we hear is their swords clashing, then silence as we see both of them panting with their swords broken. The trainees mention this, then Lemur announces that the match was a tie. As Byrne walks away, Lan tells him he did good, and that his opponent was the strongest of them. Byrne asks why that matters if he didn't win. Lan puts his hand on his shoulder, saying that he'll win the last one and bring glory to their family name, and approaches Grier. Grier stares at Lan, and is low-key disappointed, saying that he feels ordinary. He then asks Lan if he's a direct descendant. When Lan says no, Grier feels more disappointment, saying he'd rather fight one of the strong ones. He then tells Lemur he has a suggestion. Lemur asks what it is, then Grier says that since neither Runin nor Martha are tired, he would like to fight them, after he beats Lan. Lemur says that's fine if he wins. Grier confidently tells him to get the girls ready, and it'll be quick. He even decides not to use ores so he can save his power. Lan draws his sword, and Grier's instructor asks what kind of monster Lan is, saying he almost didn't notice. Lemur says it's good he isn't blind, but asks why he didn't warn the prince, since it seems like Grier thinks Lan is weak. The instructor explains how the prince will one day be the kingdom's future, but he doesn't know loss. So it would be good to teach him about it in a safe environment like this, but he is truly strong. So even Lan won't win easily. Lemur says he's gonna get bodied, then asks if he wants to bet on it. But he wants to keep it simple and just bet drinks. The instructor asks what the bet will be on, then Lemur holds his hand up to him, saying that Grier will lose in 5 attacks. On cue, Lan attacks Grier, much to his surprise and the instructor's. We see that Lan hit his side and dashed past him. Grier starts to fall over, eventually falling to his knees. Lemur starts to laugh, saying it wasn't even 5. Grier realizes he messed up, and that Lan was last for a reason, saying that he is the real deal. The instructor asks Lemur if he's really a trainee when his skills are already so high. Lemur says he was confident food was a reason, and he'll make reservations somewhere fancy. Then he surprises Grier tells Lan to stop, saying he isn't done yet. His instructor goes to tell him it's over, but then Grier starts saying he hasn't shown his true skills, and if he used his real power from the start. But gets cut off by Martha asking why he's barking like a dog, and it's unbefitting of a prince not to accept an L, saying it's just like someone she knows, Byrne caught astray. She then tells the prince she is trying to be nice, but he needs to take the L and move on. Adelia tells her to watch how she's speaking to the prince. Martha asks why she, a direct descendant, needs to be polite. Lemur starts clapping to de-escalate the argument, saying they should get Lan's opinion, and they'll leave it up to him to decide. Lan says since Lemur bet on it and he's already won, there's no point to fight. Grier lowers his head, finally acknowledging defeat, but keeps to his copium argument of letting his guard down. He gets on one knee, begging for Lan to fight him again, saying he'll regret it for the rest of his life if he doesn't get the chance. Then bows to show respect. Lan is surprised by the prince's actions, saying he thought he was just arrogant. Then Lan agrees to another fight, but saying it'll be the last one. Lan readies his blade again, and Grier looks down at his family crest, and admits to being arrogant and not being able to recognize Lan's skills. Then he rips off his family necklace, saying that he'll give it his all, and begins to release his ore, which is large enough to surprise Lan and Martha. Grier says it's no time to be holding back anymore, and he'll fight with everything he has, which is the second time he's said this. Rage starts to laugh, calling Grier dumb for not being able to see that Lan was hiding his power. Lan says he'll just win again. Rage says that Grier has more ore, and is stronger. Lan asks if he wants to make a bet, to which the gambling addict accepts, and offers him stat points. Lan readies his blade, this time with ore. Grier says it's time to start, then leaps off the ground toward Lan. While in the air, Lan quickly trades blows with him, causing a cloud of fog like in Martha's fight. But us viewers can see they are still trading blows. Grier is low-key worried that Lan isn't being pushed back at all, saying that he's more a monster than a genius. And for the third time, starts to talk about how he'll unleash his full power, which I guess he was capping about the other 2 times. Grier begins to release even more ore than before. Lan says that Grier must be using the Paris technique, only passed down to the Orwin successors, and he also notices that Grier will actually be giving it his all this time. Lan says he's memorized all the prince's techniques, and begins to use his Thousand Flames technique in retaliation. Grier is a bit taken aback by Lan's golden flames, and goes to think it's all over, but tells himself not yet. As he still has one last technique he can use, he imbues the ore into his blade, striking at Lan. Lan claps back, and they exchange hits with one another. You can hear their swords clashing over and over, as neither of them are losing footing, until Grier takes a step forward. He realizes that he pushed back his ore. And Lan looks focused. Then we hear another clash of swords as we see that Grier's sword was broken into pieces. Grier begins to panic, and Lan capitalizes on this, and strikes him down. Grier drops to his knees, as Lan is declared the winner again. Grier looks at his broken sword, and begins to reflect on how he is stronger than Lan, but smiles after realizing it was a skill gap. He understands now that there's probably many people better than he is, and he tells Lan he learned a lot. Lan says he did too, and they shake hands as Grier apologizes for his arrogance. Then he learns that Lan is younger than he is. He sighs after realizing he lost in skill and personality. He then holds something out to give to Lan, and it's the Orwin family insignia, which will mean Grier owes him a favor. Lan asks why he gave it to him, and Grier says he feels like he gained enlightenment from the duel, and he was grateful to have lost to him. He also says they'll meet again later, and he hopes that Lan is stronger than he is still at that point, as it is fun to have a goal to aim for. He also talks to Lemur, saying he won the bet, and he also tells the instructor, Tartan, it's time to dip, since he has something he needs to do. As Lan leaves the stage, he starts to wonder if it's normal to get paid for stuff like this, and that it's a strange feeling. He smiles, saying this life is surprising him over and over. Later in the evening, we see Glenn talking to Grier about what he learned in the duel. Grier compares Lan to a mature swordsman, and he's been in many duels throughout the Six Kingdoms, but it's his first time meeting someone like Lan. He learned a lot from him. Which is why after this meeting is over he plans to head back, since he wants to hurry up and train, so he can make the most out of his experience. Glenn tells Grier to thank his father for the letter. Grier says alright, then begins to depart. As he's leaving, Tartan calls out to him, saying that he believed Grier going all out in the duel was a bit too much. Since it's important for the prince to hide his strength, Grier laughs, saying he agrees. Tartan also says giving the insignia was too much. Grier disagrees, saying that Lan showed him goodwill, and even when he could have gotten angry for being disrespected, he was nice until the end. Plus, Lan showed him a technique that could be considered a secret too. The insignia is an investment. Tartan asks how. Lan explains that the skill Lan has at his age will make him a great figure one day, so it will be helpful to get close to someone like him. Tartan is surprised he's planned so far ahead. Grier tells him that he grew up in the royal family. If he couldn't think this far ahead, then he'd be dead. He wonders how much Lan will improve by the next time they meet. It cuts back to Glenn and Alfred talking, and Alfred tells him that he must be happy about Lan being praised, and it's been a while since he's seen Glenn smile so warmly. Glenn didn't even realize he was smiling. Alfred tells him he was smiling ever since Grier mentioned Lan's name. He tells Alfred he's old and just seeing things. Alfred quickly changed the subject, saying he's concerned about what Tartan said, asking what he plans to do. Glenn thinks about it, and we get a flashback of Tartan saying there's more he needs to talk about, besides the letter. He's here to relay a message from the Orwin Kingdom, and that the Five Darknesses have begun to move, which I guess will be the antagonists. Back at the training hall, Lemur is praising the trainees, and thinks that they are ready for some special training from now on. Dorian asks what it will entail. Lemur says it's less of training, but more of a real battle. They will be sure to see blood. South of the Zeekhart territory, there are mountain bandits that are called the Snow Tiger Claw. And they have been making a living by charging fees for people to pass through the mountains, but now they've become more violent, stealing from merchants along with murder. The trainees ask if their mission is to eliminate them. Lemur says that was the plan. The students ask him to explain, and one of them offers to just ambush the bandits. But Lemur says they can't, and that the bandits pillaged a village, killing all of the people, then setting it afire and running away. This shocks the trainees. Then Lemur says that their mission is to track the bandits down first, and not to let their guards down. Since they are infamous aura users, they'll head out tomorrow evening. After the meeting ends, we see Runan training in the woods. She says she wanted to work on her posture a bit more before they leave tomorrow, but it isn't going well. She thinks about Lan's swordsmanship being smooth and flexible, but she doesn't know what's wrong with hers. She bets he is in the training hall, and she debates going to ask him. But she quickly changes her mind, saying she doesn't want to bother him. Then she continues training on her own. After a bit we see her resting. She says that her movements feel smoother, and it should be enough for today. She says Lan is probably still training, so she'll say goodbye before leaving. But she remembers her mom telling her to come home early, then decides to give Lan ice cream tomorrow. As she's walking home we hear footsteps behind her, then see a man following her. He calls out to her, and she wonders who it is, and is instilled with fear upon seeing his face. The man says it's been a while, and we see it's her brother named Syria. He asks her why she looks so unhappy seeing her brother. He says it's upsetting him, and he told her before not to make a face like that. She starts to shiver in fear, and he starts to say she's gotten much stronger. And he tells her that he's proud of her, but says that she wouldn't go to duels or war risking her life, would she? She screams and falls backwards, and he asks if she forgot everything he's taught her, so he guesses he needs to remind her. He starts to bring up one of her old pet squirrels named Ruby. Then he pulls out a squirrel, saying he's sure she remembers now what happens if she doesn't listen. Runin yells at him, saying to wait, then he crushes the squirrel, turning it into a mist. Then she starts to feel fear and get PTSD flashbacks of when she was younger, and he did the same thing to her pets. She starts to drop to her knees and scream in fear. We see that she's completely distressed. He leans in close, saying that she is his little weird, and that until the chosen day comes she shouldn't do anything difficult or dangerous, and stay alive until he tells her otherwise. Then the wind begins to flow towards Syria, and is followed by something breaking. Syria looks over, and we see a blade in front of Runin. Lan has come to save the day from her creepy-ass brother. He asks him who he is. Syria says if he's going to ask someone their name, they should introduce themselves first, and it's kind of a pain in the ass. Lan says he doesn't want to hear that from a creep blocking the ally. Then asks him if he's a thief or a mugger. Syria says he could think about it like that, but he's Runin's older brother. Lan sees her shivering in fear, and how she's completely terrified. He mentions this, asking if he's really her brother. He says that it's due to a prank he pulled on her since he was excited to see her. Lan asks if deleting the squirrel was a prank. Syria then says that it wasn't real and just a toy. And he shows how his hand is clean, asking Lan why he would kill a squirrel. Lan recognizes that he just burned the blood and body using ore. Syria puts a box down, saying he's going on a long-term mission, and he only wanted to give her some snacks. Then he tells Runin she has a great friend, and to get along with him. He leaves while apologizing for his prank. Lan recognizes him, saying he's a genius swordsman, and one of the 12 monsters who will become the gods of the continent. His nickname is the Spear Swordsman. Even before his rebirth he only heard of his name. Then he wonders if he's a psycho pretending to be a hero. And he has a nasty smell like death. Lan extends his hand to Runin, saying he'll walk with her. She says okay, and we see him walking her to her carriage. As she gets in she thanks him. He tells her to sleep early since they'll be leaving early. As the carriage rides away, she looks down at the snack box, then it cuts to her in bed looking depressed. With the ice cream beside her, she starts to think about how her brother hasn't changed at all. She has a flashback of when she was a kid, and how she was telling her brother that Ruby was just sensitive because she had her children. Syria tells her that she cannot get hurt, and don't do anything but breathing, and if she tells her parents he'll kill them. He doesn't even need a family, he'll spare her and kill everyone else, and burn them. Which is why she is always so quiet, is because she's afraid to open her mouth, so she distanced herself from the other trainees. She thought she was the only loner, but it wasn't just her that was in pain. That's when she met Lan, and how hardworking he was and how much she suffered through alone. Seeing him change people's opinions through sheer effort made her want to change too. But no matter how hard she's tried, she doesn't think she can do it after all. She starts to cry, saying that it's all okay, as long as she can endure it. It then cuts to the next day, at a village called Zartan. Lemur tells the trainees they'll be staying here tonight. He compliments how hard they worked, saying that they'll get some proper rest tonight. A man walks up to them, telling them to follow him, and he'll guide them to the lodgings. At the lodging area, we see a fireplace. Then Lan thanks Rage, which confuses him. Lan explains that if it wasn't for Rage's hint he wouldn't have caught on that Syria was hiding his energy. Rage says that Syria has an air of vulgarity, and it's the least he can do for the ice cream girl. Lan thinks about how Syria has a long-term mission, but as long as he is her brother, she'll remain the way she is. Rage asks Lan to let him borrow his body so he can kill Syria, and he really wants to repay Runin's kindness. Lan says that's not going to happen. Rage continues to try, but Lan says that killing him won't help her trauma. And between both of his lives, she was the first person to be nice to him, and if anything happens to her he will kill Syria. We then get a 2-day skip, and they finally reached where the Snow Tiger boys pillaged. The trainees see burned down houses, along with corpses, wondering how they all went so far, and that they get angry that they do this to villagers. Burn also feels grossed out, and Lan points out how the bodies all had their necks sliced after being lit on fire. But is surprised that Martha isn't even shaken by the bodies, as if she's killed someone or seen a lot of bodies. Then he looks around, wondering where Runin is currently. We see her standing in front of a corpse, about to vomit. Lemur tells them all that this is what the Snow Tiger dudes did, and to remember this, so they don't let their guards down. He then holds up a silent whistle, saying to blow it if they are in danger, as only those trained can hear it. And the instructors will move immediately. He reiterates that they need to keep their guard up and do their best, and to show the enemies no mercy. Runin looks afraid, and Lemur tells the students to split into groups, and starts to designate leaders. She starts to recall her weirdo brother's words again, but snaps out of it when she hears Lan calling out to her, asking her to come with him. She looks hesitant, but says okay. They begin to walk together, and they get to the base of Mount Rufin. He explains how the high ground is good for being in an advantage, but says that the enemies won't use it for that reason, since they'd be smart enough to know that's where they'd be found. So they must be over in the hills elsewhere. He tells Runen it's time to go, and they'll leave the forest and head for the hills. She says okay, and starts to walk. He looks at her with caring eyes, to which Rage points out, asking why he isn't saying anything. Lan says since it's a family matter, and he doesn't know what to say. He doesn't even understand the emotions he's feeling, so how can he give her advice? But he does understand the trick Syria used on her, so he can fix it if given the chance. After a bit, he says it's as he's expected, that there's a forest hidden away in the hills. Since it's quite deep, and they've made it hard to find traces of humans, but it'd only work on rookies. Which of course Lan was the world's best assassin, which is the first time he's mentioned it. He says their skills might be top-notch. He sees something, and tells Runen their base is nearby. But don't make the slightest sound, and follow him. As they are walking through the forest, he spots some bear traps, and says it's as he expected. And maybe because they didn't expect to be chased this far, they've left tons of tracks. And that they must be quite used to looking down on others. He spots a kid tied up, wondering if he's a hostage. He points out that the ones standing guard are well built, but he doesn't sense any aura, so they must be low level. But the man behind them in the cave looks like he wields the sword for a living. He's sure the bandits are inside, so there's no way they'd leave their only hostage outside the base. He wonders if he should blow the whistle or not, as they should be able to ambush them somehow. But he notices how the kid looks sick, and if they leave him there's a chance he might die. He goes to reach for his sword, since they haven't noticed him yet, and it would be best to save the kid and kill the guards. As Lan steps up, Runen looks at the bandits and is scared. Lan tells her to look at him, and not to worry as they can save the kid. But she has to help him. When he gives her the signal she has to use aura to block out sound, and he'll do the rest. He asks if she can do it, and she says she'll try. The guards start to talk about how sleepy they are, asking how long they need to stand here. They then see Runen approaching them, and she begins to expand her aura to block out sound. The guards recognize this, and Lan starts to rush in while they are confused, and slices them both in one strike, taking their heads off. Runen watches as one flies over her, and looks full of fear, as she remembers Ruby, and the other dead squirrels. Then she drops to her knees while screaming, which breaks the aura barrier to block sound. He wonders if the situation just made her trauma worse, and at this rate the enemies will find out they are here. One of the men jumps to attack Runen, and Lan looks worried as the attack gets closer, but he somehow makes it and knocks the man to the floor, then warns him if he opens his mouth he will die. And he says that he needs his questions answered, and each time he refuses he'll pull a bone out. He notices Runen still in complete fear, but we learn that she put her aura back up, and he says she did well. Lan starts to interrogate the man, asking how many of them are there in total, and where they are. The man says there are 39 in the forest, and we learn there is another hostage inside the cave. The kid from before runs up, saying it's his younger sister and begs him to save her. Runen quickly tells the boy they'll save her, and not to worry. Lan tells her making promises like that is bad. She says they are gonna do it. Lan tells her that they can get rid of the bandits, but they better call in support if they want to safely rescue the hostages, since there are 36 bandits, along with their leader. She asks if she should blow the whistle, and he tells her yes. She then blows it, and he realizes he cannot even hear it, so that's why Lemur gave it to them. Then one of the men inside starts to yell, saying that they've got company. Lan understands that if someone inside was able to detect it when he wasn't, then it might be dangerous. He quickly grabs the man off the floor, using him as a hostage, as the bandits start to come out of the cave. An old man says that he's causing quite a scene, asking who he called with the whistle. Lan says it's none of his business, and he wants to trade hostages. And if he hands over the little girl, he'll return the man. The oldie starts laughing, saying he doesn't care if the guy dies or not, since the guy has no value to him, unlike the hostage. He asks Lan if he wants to see the girl's head roll, and to put his sword down. Lan says he understands, and tells Runen to turn around and wait for him to give a signal. Then Lan slices the man's throat while holding him about the man by his hair. The blood splurts everywhere, and the bandits ask him what he's doing. Lan throws his sword to them, it flies between two of them, and heads straight for the man guarding the little girl, hitting him. He then tells Runen to create a frost fog using her aura, and she begins to do so. It quickly begins to cover the area, and the bandits say they can't see anything, and Lan slips by them. He quickly picks the little girl up, and the bandits realize what he's done now. A bit later away from the cave, Lan tells Runen that the kids passed out due to the cold, and they cannot run away with them knocked out. So he believes they need to get rid of them here. He tells her to stay here and guard the kids, then she notices that his arm is cut. He tells her it's fine, and he'll quickly eliminate the bandits and come back. She pulls on his coat, telling him not to go, with tear-filled eyes, saying the instructors will be here soon, so just wait. He says her name, then gets on his knees, saying that the battlefield is scary for the inexperienced and experienced. But there's something more scary than that, and that's not being able to do anything due to being scared. She starts to recall all of the atrocities the bandits have caused thus far, and Lan reminds her that they are swordsmen of the Z-Carts. And they need to accomplish their missions, and fulfill the wills of those who were sacrificed, while protecting the ones who remain. He tells her he's unsure what her brother did to her, but the more afraid of him she is, the larger his shadow will grow. And the fear will continue to swallow her further, and that she is the only one who can protect herself, and the people she treasures. He reaches into his jacket, and hands her something, saying the decision is hers to make. She doesn't need to stay in the shadows any longer, and he begins to walk toward the cave. She starts to cry from hearing his words, saying how much she wants to change and escape, and she doesn't want to be tied down by the past. So she can protect what is important to her. She no longer wants to stay in the shadows, she wants to step forward into the light. And we see he gave her a toy squirrel. Lan starts to body the bandits, killing multiple of them, and they start to yell telling someone to kill him. Since it's just a little kid, the old man yells asking why they can't stop him. One of the bandits leap at him from behind, and Lan's spider senses activate. He dodges the attack, and the old man takes this chance to launch a surprise attack, but Spidey senses kick in again, and the old man is left stunned. As Lan has vanished, Lan Manhwa mows the guy asking if he intends to stay coward. Then beheads the man with a single strike. The bandits wonder how he's so strong at such a young age. Lan tells them to surrender since their leader is dead. But he quickly receives more strikes, and a man appears laughing, saying it's embarrassing that they are all getting bodied. The man says that Lan looks wealthy, so he must come from a nice family, but that's better. And he leaps toward Lan. We learn the man's name is Vukan, since he shouted it like a Pokemon. And he says he'll make Lan a hostage. Lan quickly realizes that this man is the leader and is quite powerful. As they go to fight, a man yells out that he found the hostages, and the bitch. We see Runin blocking his attack, and Lan says she isn't ready to fight yet. And he needs to help her. Vukan hits him asking how dare he get distracted, saying that he's going to have real fun with Lan. Lan blocks his attack, and the man fighting Runin says she's using weird skills. And tells her to hand over the hostage instead of fooling around. She thinks about how she needs to protect the kids, but understands she has to kill the man in front of her. She's glad he seems on the weaker side, and she repeats to herself that she needs to kill him. And that she cannot forget Lan's words, but she pictures her brother, and she starts to freeze up, starts to zone out while the man runs at her. She starts to doubt herself, saying she's scared and unable to swing her sword, and how she's never been able to protect something. Lan screams her name out and brings her back to her senses. She sees him fighting, and he tells her it's okay, saying that she can do it. He tells her not to worry, and in her mental she reaches out for his hand. And begins to cry, but looks full of confidence. She begins to imbue her sword with aura, saying she needs to thank Lan. She charges straight toward the man, saying that she will now start to move forward. She quickly kills the man, saying she's glad he believes in her. Vukan sighs, saying everyone is losing to kids, and calls them useless. Lan says that she isn't just a kid, and he begins to release his aura, saying that Runin overcame her dark past on her own, and how she's stronger and kinder than anyone he knows. She's a swordsman who has overcome trials. He activates his first flames, and uses a technique called Flower Full, which creates some flower petals made from fire. After killing Vukan, he begins to look through their treasure, saying he was going to check for more traps before the instructors arrived, and he finds a two-tone flower, which is a rare miracle herb. He wonders if they massacred the entire village for this. Then a man arrives asking if it's already over, and he recognizes the flower as what Vukan had. He asks if Lan killed them all, and we learn he is a bandit chief for the Eternal Bandits. Lan asks what would happen if he did, and the man says that Lan is quite good at judging the situation. Lan asks if he's part of the North and South Alliance, and the man says yes and introduces himself as Richter. Lan recognizes the name, saying that he's a genius swordsman who became the chief of a large-scale bandit group within 10 years. And the Snow Tiger group doesn't even hold a candle to him, and he has real skill. Richter recognizes Lan as a Z-card, saying he must be a trainee, and he wonders if he should kill him or not. Richter begins to release his killing intent. Lan says it's obvious he's serious, but since he's used to it, it's nothing much. Richter is surprised he withstood it, and says he's not a kid. Lan says he can kill him if he can get behind him, and he cannot win in a head-on fight. He draws his sword saying he doesn't want to back down, and tells Richter to draw his blade and fight him. Richter is surprised, saying that he'll die if he does. Lan says it's common sense for the weak to die to the strong. Richter sweats nervously, saying that's not something you hear from a little kid. Richter says he wants to fight him even less now, and it'd be a shame to kill him here. Lan says a martial artist doesn't choose where he dies. Richter asks why he keeps saying stuff like this, and then says there's another reason he doesn't want to kill him, and that vicious wind has been watching for a while. Lan is surprised, and Richter says it'd be fun if Lan was part of his alliance. Then as he's leaving he asks his name, to which Lan tells him, and he stands proudly. Richter smiles, saying he sees, and he hopes that he'll hear about him one day, then leaves. Lan says he's gone, and tells Runan they should leave too. She says his name, then asks if she was good. He looks at her, then smiles, saying she was the best. And she smiles back, and with this their first mission came to an end, as they escort the kids back. When they returned with Vukan's head, Burin and Martha hated the fact they took another L, and Lima comforted the other students for performing bad, and gave them advice, which was Lima recapping his first mission. Rage took the chance to humble brag too, and Lan hated every minute of their stories. And since the rescued kids had no parents, Runan's family took them in, since they seemed to like her. After returning, Glenn summoned the both of them and gave them bronze medals for their accomplishments. Lan was surprised that Glenn praised him, but also that they gave him the two-tone flower, since it was a rare medicine. But he's glad for it. It cuts to night, and Lan is surprised that Dorian is at his house. He asks why he's there, and we learn that Sylvia asked him to come by so he could tell her about the mission. Lan asks if he told her everything, and Dorian says yes, since it was a touching story. Lan realizes this is bad, and Sylvia quickly runs to the door. He starts to make excuses, then she leaps at him, hugging him. She tells him great job, and he's surprised that he's being praised. She asks why he thought she'd be mad. He tells her she always says to be careful. She explains how the first patriarch wielded his sword to protect the weak, and she heard he always helped those in need. And her dream was to become a swordsman like that, so why would she scold him for saving people? She tells him how proud she is. Even Judiel says she is proud, and the other maid. Sylvia says he's growing into a good man. Lan is still unfamiliar with the emotions he's feeling, then notices Dorian quickly scurried off, and Rage tells him that he ran away a while ago. Lan says it isn't a bad night, and it cuts to Runan putting Lan's toy squirrel on her nightstand beside her bed while smiling. She recalls his words, saying she'll make sure to thank him next time she sees him. And then it cuts to Lemur laying in a hammock, and how he was watching over Lan when Richter was there. He smiles at Lan, ready to fight, saying it's been a long time since he's seen in someone what he saw in the Patriarch, and that a new seed for King has sprouted. If you've watched till the end, comment Fury to let me know. Subscribe for more content, leave a like or a comment to help the channel out. Thanks for watching.